Chapter 44. Genius, 1 second. Remember, if you want to go. Shua, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Xie Junping had already prepared the car downstairs. Acumen College forbade all outside vehicles from entering. What Xie Junping prepared was only an electric sightseeing car, just like the one that Li Xueqing was using in the hospital this morning. It seemed that this kind of car was the standard for the rich second generation in the school. Luo Nan's mind stirred a bit when he thought of Li Xueqing. He sized up Xie Junping with a bit of scrutiny. There was no reason for Xie Junping, who was in the same position as the Burning Wraith, to be exempt from the wantonly distribution of seeds by the Burning Wraith yesterday morning. Luo Nan still remembered that Xie Junping's emotions were on the verge of collapse at the time. This sort of intense negative emotions was precisely the Burning Wraith's favorite. However, from the looks of it, this fellow was completely normal. At the very least, there wasn't a demonic shadow leaping out from his body and screaming at Luo Nan to kill him. Xie Junping naturally didn't know that Luo Nan's thoughts had turned in an instant. He dragged Luo Nan into the car and personally acted as the driver. He drove the car to the northern district of the campus. Luo Nan sat in the front passenger seat and pondered for a bit. The mental plane vibrated, and the heavily chained crow extended out from between his eyebrows. It paused for a moment, then it continued to extend out, drawing close to Xie Junping's body. At the front of the chain, the red light of the abstract symbol flickered, almost like a demonic eye. However, what it observed and sensed was a darker and more profound level. Several seconds later, the red light abruptly increased in intensity, the light almost piercing into Xie Junping's body. However, the heavily chained crow let out a cry, forcefully suppressing this disturbance. There's something fishy going on. Luo Nan wasn't that surprised. After all, logically speaking, it would be strange if he didn't. Moreover, the one inside Xie Junping's body was clearly far less mature than Li Xueqing's. It was still in a half-hibernating state and was using Xie Junping's qi and blood to conceal its aura. If Luo Nan were to use himself as a reference, this was probably the stage before he clashed with Li Xueqing on the warship yesterday. It had already been 2 days, yet it was still so stunted. Perhaps it was due to the host's personality? The chain circled around Xie Junping's body a few times before slowly retracting. Wait, Luo Nan didn't act blindly without thinking. Ever since he had swallowed the other Burning Wraith, his understanding of his own abilities had deepened by a large margin. His thinking and application became more comprehensive. Currently, his abilities could be roughly divided into 2 areas. Part of it was the heavily chained crow, representing the power of the format of My Heart's a Prison. It was relatively restrained and like a stabilizing needle. It controlled and suppressed the abnormal changes inside and outside. The other part was an abstract symbol formed by the Burning Wraith, which could be shortened to Wraith Sign. This thing retained a considerable part of the functions of its original form. It was extremely invasive, like a ferocious beast foraging for food. Its senses were sharp, and its appetite was greedy. From time to time, it would want to do something big. At the present stage, the suppressive power of the chains was overwhelming. The Wraith Sign could only lie dormant and wait for an opportunity in the vast majority of circumstances. Only in especially intense stimulation, such as the other Burning Wraith, the killing intent directed at Luo Nan, or the eruption of extreme emotions nearby, would the Wraith Sign be activated. Moreover, all of its actions were under the control of the chains. From this, Luo Ji clearly understood that his foundation lay in the heavily chained crow, in the format, and that the Wraith Sign was just an application tool. When it came to tools, one had to carefully study their principles and usage. Xie Junping was a pretty good reference. Well, it could be said that it was a small revenge. Luo Nan's mind stirred as the chains retracted. He commanded the chains to streak across his wrist, making noiseless contact with the wristband. The sealed enclosure of the electronic device was completely meaningless to the mental scan. The various devices inside were the same. Correspondingly, Luo Nan discovered that the resolution of his own senses had a limit. He could only have a rough sense of the internal structure of the wristband. It was extremely fuzzy. The only exception was that long thread. It was extremely eye-catching. Or perhaps it could be said that it was too dazzling. When it made contact on the purely mental plane, the dazzling radiance above the long thread was truly like lightning streaking across the night sky. Of Luo Nan's two ability modules, the Wraith sign had no reaction whatsoever. As for the heavily chained crow, wasn't this a conducting wire? Luo Nan let out a muffled groan. He was caught off guard, and the lightning actually followed the heavily chained crow to hack into his brain from the space between his eyebrows. His body shook violently. What's wrong? Xie Junping jumped in fright. It's nothing. Luo Nan rubbed his forehead, his expression odd. If one were to pick the best place in Acumen College, it would undoubtedly be the city wetlands that the school had deliberately circled when it was founded. As one of the green lungs of the city, this place was practically completely covered in vegetation. It breathed in and out fresh air at all times. And the slightly damp ground seemed to be able to permeate the gurgling sound of the long river that passed through the forest into one's blood vessels. Therefore, most of the beauty of Acumen College lay in the wetlands. Half of the beauty of the wetlands lay in the long river that quietly flowed through the forest. The long river divided the wetlands into the north and south banks. It also divided the tranquil and bustling areas. The bustling south bank's landmark building was the school's auditorium. North across the river was the lush wetlands jungle. Practically no traces of man-made structures could be seen at a glance. At this time of day, the south bank was like a weave of people, while the north bank was relatively quiet. Xie Junping led Luo Nan into the jungle of the north bank. He seemed to be very familiar with the path. He was always able to pick the smoothest path among the small paths in the forest, and he continued to advance. At the same time, he gave an introduction. Compared to the south bank, the north bank actually occupies the majority of the wetlands. Many of the school's research institutes are located here due to the good environment. However, each one of them comes at an exorbitant price. Not only do they have to pay exorbitant taxes, but they also have strict restrictions on construction materials, infrastructure methods, and structural design. As for the degree of strictness, you'll understand when you look at the auditorium. Acumen College's auditorium was well known among the schools in the entirety of Xia City. It had an ancient Oriental architectural style with flying eaves and arches. It was hidden within the jungle, and it was a part of the wetlands garden. However, the surface portion of the auditorium didn't have any practical functions. Its functional area was completely underground. Only in this way could it accommodate over 100,000 teachers and students attend the ceremony at the same time. See? The auditorium is in the wetlands. You still have to lie down. According to the regulations, no buildings are allowed to exceed 15 meters in height within the wetlands. In other words, it's a quarter of the height of Climbing Hill. The Climbing Hill that Xie Junping spoke of was across the river from the auditorium. Actually, it was just a small mound that was only 60 to 70 meters in height. Right now, the trees on the mound were like a sea. Green, yellow, and red leaves intertwined in a gorgeous display of colors. An octagonal pavilion stood on top of the mound, giving it a wide field of view. One could practically see the entire region. It was the most refreshing view. Actually, Luo Nan quite liked to go up there and gaze at the wind from afar. It was precisely because the scenery here was very agreeable to his heart that he had endured Xie Junping's suspense all this time. Xie Junping's mouth gushed without end. There aren't many places in the wetlands where buildings can be built. And no one can bear the crime of destroying nature. If one wants to achieve complete functionality, then one can only find underground space. But the problem is that the geological structure is within the scope of the wetlands protection. The south bank is a bit better, but digging 3 meters down from the north is against the rules. Those research institutes want to act pretentious, and that's bitter. Having said this, he winked. However, there are always exceptions to everything. Xie Junping extended his finger forward, letting Luo Nan look at the depths of the jungle. There was a corner of a certain building that sprouted dense branches and leaves. The first thing Luo Nan felt when he saw it was that it seemed very old. It was probably because the edges of the building had a rust-like color. It gave people the impression of roughness. Xie Jinping beamed. Don't look down on it. Gear, which is the building before our eyes, is an exception among the 39 research institutes and society buildings on the North Bank. Chapter 45. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Talk Net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Gear? Yes. The name is quite strange, right? But I feel like I won't be able to find a more appropriate description in a short amount of time. Xie Jinping was like a hard-working salesman, but the results were mediocre. Luo Nan pressed his forehead lightly. He had already formed a habit of doing similar actions during this period of time, and it made his concentration less focused. The two turned around the natural forest wall barrier as they spoke. Soon, they saw the front of the building. It was just like the impression they had just gotten. The outer wall of the building was a rusty red. It didn't look like any color of the surrounding natural environment. Instead, it looked like rusty metal with a bit of paint. The main body of the building was covered by the long vines and weeds of the jungle. The light in the jungle was gradually dimming, making it even harder to see the overall layout of the building. Xie Jinping was a bit worried that this kind of exterior would give Luo Nan a bad impression. He rushed to add, less renovations have been done in the past 2 years. The environment is a bit messy, but the inside will definitely give you a pleasant surprise. Luo Nan didn't say anything. He just wanted to see what Xie Jinping was up to. The two followed the small path overgrown with weeds and turned to the main entrance of the building. This place should have been a small plaza in the past, but it had already been taken over by the jungle due to the lack of people taking care of it. If the main entrance wasn't tightly shut, the long vines of the wetlands would have extended into the main hall. Right now, the entire building was tightly surrounded by the jungle. The small plaza was the best location in the vicinity, but it was still hard to see the entire building. Only now did Luo Nan realize, there's no one here? There was one last semester, but now it's just an empty shell. Xie Jinping used his wristband to connect to the AI's authority. The metal main entrance of the building immediately lifted up, and the hall space inside automatically lit up. Xie Jinping led Luo Nan through the door and explained to him at the same time, this place currently belongs to the Order Club. It used to be a very active old club. I've even heard that it was established before the school was founded. During its golden age, it attracted the sponsorship of over a dozen of the world's top 500 rich people. It was extremely awesome, but there were too many rich people. It was troublesome, especially after the first few old members graduated. The younger generation relied on their respective rich people and fought to their heart's content. The club was originally a good club, but it was forcefully turned into an Azura field. Hatred was tied into a dead knot. In 90 and 93, 2 major incidents occurred consecutively, and the nature of the incidents was very bad. The school banned the recruitment of new members, and the club collapsed in an instant. At this moment, the two of them walked into the empty hall. The square layout could not be seen here. The spiral staircase, the vertical elevator, and the circular corridor divided the hall, but there was also a hint that it extended into a wider space. Xie Jinping shrugged. The main structure of this building is the circle. That is probably why it is called Gear. It was said that there were 15 main rooms, halls, and a large courtyard that connected all the floors. They were all round, insanely round. You might feel a little dizzy at first, but you'll get used to it. Luo Nan didn't feel any discomfort. On the contrary, he was a bit curious. Xie Jinping continued to introduce, the club has indeed reached its end in this generation. Actually, the qualifications to recruit new members were going to be restored this semester. But those idiots didn't court death. Last semester, a financial problem occurred. All of the rich people withdrew from the club, and the flow of funds was completely cut off. The old members left the club one by one. The few that didn't leave were all related to the case. They're still under investigation. Once their crimes are confirmed, the club will automatically disband. Xie Jinping sighed hypocritically. The club hasn't even disbanded yet, and there are already people fighting to the death outside. Luo Nan was a bit surprised. This place is very popular? Of course. The club in the school has been eyeing the North Bank for a long time, especially gear. It occupies half a hectare. It is already one of the best among the clubs and research institutes. It was the most eye-catching building on the North Bank back in the day. Over the years, those rich people have added quite a few things to it. More importantly, this is the only location on the North Bank that can be dug deep. Of all the research institutes and club buildings on the North Bank, this is the only place that has enough underground space. In this aspect alone, there was no one that could compare. Those people are throwing money at each other right now. They're just short of ripping each other apart. Xie Juanping's spittle flew everywhere as he spoke. The problem was that Luo Nan was completely indifferent to this sort of gossip. His face was stupefied. Xie Juanping couldn't help but feel a strong sense of defeat, as if he was flirting with a blind person. He could only take the initiative to give a hint. Junior Nan, don't you want to know who will be taking over in the end? Luo Nan shot him a glance. The results haven't come out yet, right? There are only two left. The Construction Society and the Mystic Arts Research Society will take turns bidding. Let's see who can suppress the other. The results will come out in the next 2 days. I feel that the Mystic Arts Research Society has a much higher chance. The Mystic Arts Research Society. Luo Nan naturally paid more attention when he heard that it was the super club that he had misunderstood. Xie Juanping's face revealed a strange smile. The Mystic Arts Research Society is going all out for the sake of obtaining this place. They have already promised to completely take over all the debts and personnel of the Order Club. Hee. They don't even think about it. Even if everything goes smoothly, it will be next semester before they finish the process. But if no one takes care of this damned place, it will soon become ruins. When the time comes, it may not be worth the price. Junior Nan, don't you agree? What kind of logic was this? Luo Nan swept his gaze across the large hall. He confirmed that there was certainly an automatic cleaning system here. Perhaps there were even intelligent machines. There was practically no dust floating in the area that he could see. With this degree of maintenance, let alone half a year, there wouldn't be any unforeseen changes even if another 10 years passed. But Xie Juanping's words were completely based on another objective. Luo Nan roughly understood. Xie Juanping's attitude was already completely clear when he spoke to this point. Junior Nan, you see. If you want to protect the assets of the club to the greatest degree, then you need someone to maintain this building and maintain basic operations. But the resources and connections of the Order Club are of the past. Aside from a pile of debt, there is nothing else. If you want to do this, then you need to spend the funds of the Student Council. If you calculate it down to a minimum of 100,000 a year, this is all a deficit. If there is a person who is willing to enter this already declining club at this time and spend his precious private time to carry out maintenance work for free. Moreover, he doesn't have any club activities to increase his connections. Oh my, that's a huge sacrifice. Junior Nan, this kind of person is hard to find. Your big brother has been worried about this matter for the past few days to the point that my hair has turned white. You see, can you help me solve this problem? Luo Nan looked at Xie Juanping's performance and was speechless for a time. But he was completely clear about Xie Juanping's intentions. This was probably a roundabout way to save the country. According to Xie Juanping's plan, Luo Nan needed to first join the Order Club, which was already on the verge of collapse, and become an official member. Then he would endure for half a semester. Then the club would merge, and he would become an unshakable extra. He would enter the Mystic Arts Research Society. This was what Xie Juanping had already promised. This path looked quite good. Of course, it required a high-level cadre of the Student Council, like Xie Juanping, to take action. Only then could a club on the verge of collapse be able to go through the entire process and forcefully stuff a new student in. However, the Mystic Arts Research Society was backed by a large financial backer. It was also a circle of rich second generations. Would they really acknowledge Xie Juanping's crude shoehorning? At least right now, Xie Juanping was very confident. He chuckled as he pushed Luo Nan into the elevator. Relax, relax. I'm very familiar with that side. According to the people in the inner circle, they're really sparing no expense in this merger. I've already given them a heads up before. 1 or 2 people isn't much. Junior Nan, I'm not being unreasonable. If it weren't for yesterday's confusion, causing you to miss your exams, why would we need to go around in circles? This damned place hasn't had a good time ever since Yan Hong's reputation was ruined and the research team was disbanded. They say that we're taking advantage of them. I'd even say that we're committing a crime. A certain name entered Luo Nan's ears, and he stopped in his tracks. He suddenly turned his head. Which one are you talking about? Chapter 46. Genius, 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Oh, right on target. Xie Junping's eyes were practically brimming with tears when he saw Luo Nan's intense reaction. Was it easy for Brother MB to hold it in the entire journey? Wasn't it to see this expression on your face? Xie Junping felt that all of his homework hadn't been done in vain just from this instant's harvest. Even someone as wooden and reserved as Luo Nan had to break through when facing his family's great enemy. His degree of devotion had clearly increased by several levels. If this goes on, I'm not afraid that you won't accept my kindness. Feeling that things were finally on the right track, Xie Junping relaxed and felt that his acting skills were off the charts. He blinked and pretended to be innocent. What do you mean by that? Luo Nan stared at him. You said Yan Hong. Which Yan Hong? Xie Junping inexplicably felt a bit weak when facing Luo Nan's gaze. But he still answered step by step. It's the one who used to be a professor at the academy. The one who had an academic scandal in the year 90. Xie Junping spoke in a roundabout manner, but Luo Nan's words went straight to the heart of the matter. The one that came up with archetype formatting theory? His laboratory is here? Yes, I've been here since I was hired as a professor in 1983 until 1990. Xie Junping could recite the information he had just collected fluently. If he remembered correctly, these were precisely the 2 most important year nodes that Zhang Yingying had analyzed to have an impact on Luo Nan's life. Luo Nan was silent for a few seconds. He moved to the side, no longer blocking the elevator door. Xie Junping took the opportunity to enter, chose a floor, and the elevator began to descend. In an enclosed space like the elevator, where there was nothing to do, silence was the most awkward. Xie Junping tried to liven up the atmosphere, but Luo Nan took the initiative to speak. Senior, looks like you've done a lot of homework. It's here. That's it. Xie Junping didn't want to be an idiot who did good deeds without leaving his name. Talking to smart people really saved him a lot of effort. He grinned and said, It's all right. Helping you, Brother Nan, is also to relieve my guilt. Naturally, I have to do my best. The so-called effort was not an exaggeration at all. In order to come up with this idea, Xie Junping also scratched his head. Luo Nan's society crisis. Yan Hong, who was suspected of stealing Luo Nan's grandfather's research results. The Mystic Arts Research Society's development plan. In the end, they were able to find this explosive point that perfectly converged many elements. However, Xie Junping was worried that his private investigation would make Luo Nan unhappy. He hurriedly began to patch things up. Junior Nan, I didn't purposely dig up your background. In this day and age, information is everywhere. I just don't like the look of that bastard Yan Hong. He's too damn annoying. Junior Nan, you've been suffering these past few years. Luo Nan turned to look at him. Senior, you really know quite a bit. That's about it. Xie Junping smiled awkwardly. Luo Nan's thoughts ran far too deep. His intense emotions only lasted for a fleeting moment. Now he had returned to his normal state of not showing his emotions on his face. Hard to please. At this time, the elevator had reached the 4th floor, which was about 15 meters underground. The elevator door opened, and their field of vision suddenly widened. This floor has been completely cleared. It belongs to Gear's central control room. The basic layout of the building was that the 4 floors above ground belonged to the Society's activity area, and the 7 floors below ground belonged to the experiment area. The underground space exceeds the above-ground space. Of course, this is the only building on the North Bank to have such a thing. Xie Junping forcefully raised his spirits and explained to Luo Nan, Right now, the central AI is operating at a low consumption rate. I'll activate it later, and we'll be able to find out just how many usable resources are left in this building. Luo Nan's focus was on something else. Can we still find Yan Hong's experimental data from before? This really isn't easy. Xie Junping scratched his head and said, back when Yan Hong's academic scandal broke out, it was said that he specifically designed an experimental accident to destroy many key locations and annihilate the evidence. Afterwards, Quantum Corporation received all of his experimental legacy, and they pretty much cleaned out this place. But if we look carefully, we might be able to harvest something? Xie Junping was afraid of dispelling Luo Nan's interest, so he forcefully changed his words in the end. Luo Nan was very clear about these thoughts. He knew that if he didn't clearly express that he enjoyed it, who knew how long this person would be on tenterhooks? But here came the problem. Even if Xie Junping had a life-saving grace, even if Xie Junping held a not insignificant weakness in his hands, was there really a need for Xie Junping to be afraid to this extent? So much, so that he was nearly sick many times. Was it because of the burning wraith? One was scared to death. The other hated to death. Xie Junping and Li Xueqing could be considered two extremes. Oh! Luo Nan suddenly thought of Li Xueqing and his mind stirred. It seems that the news from this morning should have spread, especially within this small circle. Rumors and whatnot flew the fastest. He stared at Xie Junping, looking pensive. Xie Junping just felt uncomfortable from head to toe. He was about to speak again when Luo Nan beat him to it. I heard that Li Xueqing is Senior's best friend? Xie Junping jumped in fright. He really did jump back half a step. His reaction was extremely intense. There's no such thing. You absolutely must not misunderstand. Misunderstand what? So, what if it's a misunderstanding? Xie Junping's face was embarrassed, nervous, and even a bit fearful. He spoke all the more carefully. Junior Nan, I'm saying that my relationship with Li Xueqing is very ordinary. This matter. I'm talking about yesterday's matter. What's the difference between yesterday and today? Luo Nan's series of questions nearly caused Xie Junping to collapse. So Luo Nan didn't force him any further. He just confirmed a fact. It seemed that this fellow Xie Junping was the one who had misunderstood something. A few clues converged in his mind. It was as if he had constructed a sketch out of thin air. Luo Nan's thoughts suddenly became clear and he blurted out, Senior was also in the medical department this morning? The moment he spoke, he discovered that this judgment had jumped far too far. However, the results were extremely shocking. Xie Junping staggered, nearly falling face first onto the ground. Luo Nan grabbed him by the shoulder, saving him from the pain of his face hitting the ground. But Xie Junping's reaction was absurd to the extreme. He screamed, I didn't see anything. All right, the matter was finally made clear. Xie Junping really was in the medical department this morning. Moreover, he was in the same hospital as Li Xueqing because of a fight over a woman's affections. Li Xueqing ran fast during the earthquake, so Xie Junping fell behind. Li Xueqing and his group were in a hurry. They didn't see Luo Nan in the crowd, but Xie Junping did. And he saw with his own eyes that Li Xueqing and Luo Nan passed each other for a few seconds before Li Xueqing fell unconscious. Li Xueqing sank into shock and was still in the intensive care unit. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't have thought too much about it. But Xie Junping knew of the conflict between Luo Nan and Li Xueqing. He also obtained a few details from Lian Yu and the others. More importantly, his life was hanging by a thread yesterday morning. He was awed by Luo Nan's strange gaze. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was mysterious. He unconsciously leaned towards a few bizarre directions. He originally wanted to find Zhang Yingying to discuss this, but for some unknown reason, he was unable to contact her for an entire day. It was as if the hidden indigo firm had closed down. Perhaps he could only do it himself. And think of this move. On one hand, he wanted to build a good relationship with Luo Nan. On the other hand, he wanted to recruit a capable person. Xie Junping's current state was completely unfazed. He just needed to use a bit of strength and he would be like a bamboo tube pouring beans. Luo Nan sighed and patted Xie Junping's shoulder. Xie Junping had said so much, but he had missed the most crucial reason. Of course, Xie Junping himself was completely unaware of it. Luo Nan borrowed the action of patting Xie Junping's shoulder to shake the heavily chained crow. It came out from between Xie Junping's eyebrows, and the wraith sign flickered with red light. It instantly pierced in and out of Xie Junping's body. Xie Junping shivered inexplicably, and on a plane he was unable to reach, a dark red glowing mist escaped from his body. It was blocked head-on by the heavily chained crow and dispersed with a wave. Chapter 47. A Genius in 1 Second. Remember love? Speak Net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Luo Nan deliberately suppressed the wraith sign's devouring of his life essence. The turbulence on the mental plane ended in a short 2 seconds. Xie Junping couldn't avoid receiving a bit of impact, but it should be within an acceptable range. Luo Nan saw that Xie Junping was absent-minded, so he patted his shoulder in an attempt to comfort him. But who knew that Xie Junping would shake his head before Luo Nan could say anything? His gaze drifted, and he spat vaguely. What's that sound? Is he talking nonsense? This was Luo Nan's first thought. But then he noticed that his heavily chained crow slowly trembled and retracted, emitting a crashing sound.
Senior?
What did you hear? Xie Junping's face turned towards Luo Nan, but his gaze was unfocused. He opened his mouth and suddenly fell backwards. Luo Nan had to support him to prevent the back of his head from smashing into the ground. But right now Xie Junping had already sunk into an unconscious state. He was drowsy, as if he was having a nightmare. His body temperature rose and fell, causing his wristband to start a health alarm and send a signal outwards. The problem was that they were 15 meters underground, and they were in the former laboratory. The signal shielding was in place. No matter how advanced the wristband was, it was destined to be useless. The effects of destroying the parasitic burning wraith were this serious? Luo Nan absolutely didn't expect this. He had clearly controlled the damage to Xie Junping's life force. Could it be that the connection between the burning wraith and Xie Junping on the mental plane was deeper than expected? Luo Nan's expression was grave. He let Xie Junping lie on the ground, and the heavily chained crow came out again. He let the wraith sign probe Xie Junping's body from inside out. The problem was that there were no more abnormalities, at least on the level that the wraith sign was able to probe. As for the state of Xie Junping's body, Luo Nan was even more powerless. The structure of the human body was far too precise and complex. Luo Nan had used drugs to shape his format and mutate his nervous system. This was already a bold cognition and transformation of the body. But what he understood was still a drop in the ocean. Luo Nan really didn't wish for Xie Junping to be like this. But things had already happened. He couldn't do anything about it. He pondered for a moment, then he carried Xie Junping on his back. He prepared to deal with Xie Junping on the surface. From the functions of Xie Junping's wristband, as long as the signal could go out, he should be able to alert the network and call for medical help. Truthfully speaking, carrying Xie Junping on his back wasn't easy for Luo Nan at all. This guy weighed about 70 to 80 kilograms. He was unconscious and didn't know how to cooperate, which made him even heavier. Luo Nan was soon covered in sweat. Fortunately, the elevator was in sight. He freed a hand to press the button, but he clearly heard a warning beep at this time. It seemed to be coming from Xie Junping's wristband. Luo Nan thought that something was wrong with Xie Junping again. He hurriedly put Xie Junping down and prepared to check on him. But he never expected that in this instant, the sound of an electric switch would ring out and everything before his eyes would suddenly sink into pitch-black darkness. Luo Nan was stupefied for half a second before he suddenly lowered his head. At this moment, there was still a bit of light in the darkness. It came from Xie Junping's wrist, his bracelet. A series of messages flooded the screen. The person granted temporary authority will enter a state of unconsciousness. The laboratory's defense system had entered level B. The awakening function was activated, but the person who granted temporary authority did not respond. There are no other authorized users within the laboratory. The laboratory's defense system entered Grade A status. The energy system was shut down, the communication system was shut down, the transportation system was shut down, and the life support system was shut down. The laboratory was locked down. The messages finished flooding the screen, and the glow of the wristband was extinguished. The faint luster was like the mocking gaze of a devil. It blinked once, and then it was ignored. Luo Nen touched the wristband in an attempt to save it, but the wristband's personal defense function was activated. No matter how he touched it, there was no response. Luo Nen smashed his fist heavily against the elevator door. Modern society was undoubtedly a society of authority. The Internet of Things covered every corner of the city. The level of electronic authority determined where you could go in the city and what level you could go. Your body was free, but your authority was controlled. Using the identity of a low authority to forcefully break into the boundaries of a high authority was like hitting your nose against a wall. Or you would be like Luo Nan, trapped on the spot by an inexplicable trap. Authority traps were very common. They were usually located in important locations like elevators, corridors, and other relatively confined and narrow areas. The purpose was to trap unauthorized trespassers and then hand them over to the police to deal with. The area that Luo Nan encountered was much more spacious, but the location wasn't ideal. This was an enclosed space 15 meters underground. In this place, the darkness was like a demon that existed everywhere. The silence permeated the air, conveying unease and fear. Luo Nan stood at the elevator door. He could clearly hear his and Xie Junping's breathing. Several seconds later, he put Xie Junping down and leaned against the elevator door. "Hey, wake up." Xie Junping didn't respond. Papa, there was still no response. Calling, slapping, pinching, and other methods were all used. Xie Junping was still in an unconscious state, but his body temperature had calmed down quite a bit. Luo Nan was speechless. He stood there for a dozen more seconds before smashing the elevator door again. But this time it was a bit lighter. Then he carried Xie Junping on his back and walked back. The darkness followed him like a shadow. This was the most thorough darkness. The dam defense system of the laboratory had cleanly cut off all energy. There really wasn't any light at all. Luo Nan originally wanted to use his own wristband for illumination, but the wristband had entered a low-power state half an hour ago due to the long wire. A bit of light was equivalent to nothing. He simply didn't need it. The darkness had no meaning for him anyway. The dark chain stretched out once more. The wraith sign at the front flickered with a bewitching red light. This light only flickered on the mental plane, but it shone onto the plane of reality through some form. It allowed Luo Nan to observe the surrounding environment without using his naked eye. In a certain sense, it was even clearer than the naked eye. This could be considered as the out-of-body perspective of the soul. In any case, the feeling of being able to see the environment clearly was quite good. The unfathomable things within the pure darkness were swept away in an instant. The pressure on the mental plane was somewhat alleviated. Luo Nan found a chair in the empty central control room. He placed Xie Junping on it and ignored him for the time being. He walked in front of the control panel that had already been completely shut down. He casually pressed a few buttons, but there was no response at all. The threat of reality was still as heavy as ever. Luo Nan didn't forget the last bit of information that flashed on Xie Junping's wristband. Of the several systems that had been completely shut down, the most fatal was undoubtedly the life support system. If this system didn't constantly circulate air in the enclosed space 15 meters underground, the trapped people, including trespassers and temporary authority holders, would face the risk of suffocating to death before long. From this, it could be seen that the owner of this laboratory was truly vicious and merciless. If one were to scrutinize the legal provisions, this was undoubtedly illegal. But when Luo Nan thought about who the previous owner of this laboratory was, he felt that this was quite in line with his own psychological expectations. Chapter 48. Genius, 1 second. Remember, if you want to go? Showa Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. The previous owner of the laboratory, Yan Hong, was the one who put forward the archetype formatting theory. It had flourished for a time in the 80s, and this reputation was obtained by stepping on the shoulders of Luo Nan's grandfather. Love, go, small, say, net back then, when Luo Yuandao was involved in human experimentation, the media had focused on the wilderness, the vagrants, the victims, and other more explosive details. However, they did not pay much attention to the person who exposed the matter. Coupled with the so-called witness protection policy, the identity of the key witness had never really entered the public's attention. But Luo Nan knew very well that the one who did this was none other than Yan Hong, who had worked in the same research institute as Luo Yuandao. Not long after Luo Yuandao's lawsuit was finalized, Yan Hong proposed the prototype formatting theory and gained a huge academic reputation. But it was precisely because of this that he fell so miserably after being exposed for plagiarizing Luo Yuandao's experimental data in 1990. The outside world did not know, but the academic world still had fresh memories of this case, and they were clear on many of the details. However, due to the special nature of Luo Yuandao's case, as well as the involvement of Quantum Corporation, everyone kept it a secret. It was only circulated within a small, closed circle and was not exposed to the public media. During the investigation by the Scientific Research Ethics Committee, Yan Hong deliberately caused an experiment accident and destroyed the evidence. His actions were also extremely bad. After this incident, Yan Hong's reputation in the academic world was completely ruined. In the end, he disappeared without a trace. It was only natural that such a person would set up some death traps in his own laboratory. Right now, Luo Nan had quite the thought, this is how it should be. Then he felt indescribably excited. Yes, it was excitement. Ever since Luo Nan understood the cause and effect of his grandfather's case, he very naturally viewed Yan Hong as the main culprit. For the young Luo Nan back in the day, Yan Hong, who was like the sun at high noon at that time, was fully deserving of being the final boss. He was the target that Luo Nan would defeat in the future. Unfortunately, before Luo Nan could grow up, this boss inexplicably collapsed in the year 90. The results of his research became a part of Quantum Corporation's acquisition of many intellectual properties. Though Luo Nan hadn't completely lost his goal to strive for, he still felt a sense of loss in his heart. But who would have thought that after 6 years, in an abandoned laboratory, he would actually get the chance to fight with this boss from a distance? Even though he was just imagining an empty target, it had an exceptionally different meaning for Luo Nan. Luo Nan's thoughts were unprecedentedly lively. His courage and boldness were unleashed to the extreme. He took a few deep breaths to calm his mind. He stood in front of the control panel, and the heavily chained crow cut into it. As the central control area of a laboratory, the equipment here was nothing more than a few control panels and a few screens. Its function was similar to that of a surveillance center. Under normal operation, one could see the interior of the building, including every corner of the surrounding area. When it came to the core modules of the energy and life support system, this was only a control panel. At this moment, when the power was completely cut off, it had no practical significance. Luo Nan's idea was to utilize the sensing abilities of the heavily chained crow and the wraith sign to trace the connections of the various equipment within the central control console. He would find the location of the core module and think of a way to reboot the system. Love, go, small, say, net kuaz for how to interfere with reality from the spiritual level. He wanted to give it a try. The heavily chained crow was like a python piercing through the darkness. It followed the complicated wires of the sealed area all the way down. The wiring of the laboratory was extremely clear. The highly integrated structure saved Luo Nan quite a bit of trouble. During this time, he only made one mistake before he found the true location of the central control system. One end of this place was connected to the independent power station of the laboratory. The other end was connected to the core supercomputer and every other system module. Frankly speaking, this was a bit too unfriendly for Luo Nan, this electronic noob. Luo Nan hesitated for a bit before choosing the power station. After all, the most fatal problem right now was the power outage. If he could realize the reactivation of the power station, then he would have won half the battle. But right when he changed the direction of the heavily chained crow, The depths of his brain where his main body was located felt a slight numbness. Then there was a flash of electricity that directly hacked out. It was that mysterious and unfathomable long thread. Of course, in this enormous laboratory, the long thread couldn't even be considered a strand of hair. But the lightning that it had transformed into traveled along the heavily chained crow. In the blink of an eye, it leaped out from the front end of the chain and disappeared within the dense electrical wiring. Luo Nen covered his head. He couldn't understand what he was thinking for a time. This long thread was a little too strange. When the long thread seeped into his wristband, it inexplicably opened up an interface that should have been on the flexible e-ink screen. It also consumed a large portion of the wristband's power. Luo Nan's initial judgment was that it was a special kind of electronic device. It was possible that it had integrated a processor, a memory module, a sensor, and many other functions. But when Luo Nan's heavily chained crow swept past, the long thread actually had an intense reaction. It charged all the way into his brain in an inconceivable manner. Luo Nan's period of absent-mindedness was because the long thread seemed to have fused into a certain location in his brain. But it possessed an intense sense of existence. The brain didn't feel pain. The so-called sense of existence was either a kind of abnormal electrical signal or a kind of reaction on the mental plane. Luo Nan was inclined towards the latter because the long thread clearly had a subtle exchange of information with the heavily chained crow. It was just that he was still unable to understand the level of information. Luo Nan had already given a rather high evaluation of this magical toy that the coward had hidden in the flexible e-ink screen. But today, this thing had given him a new surprise. Even though the long thread had broken away from the heavily chained crow, there was still a clear connection between the two. Luo Nan could sense it from this. The electricity it transformed into followed the cable and advanced in a reverse direction. It instantly entered Luo Nan's estimated location of the power station. That area suddenly brightened a short second later. From Luo Nan's perspective, the surging electricity simply seemed to be assaulting his face on the level of his senses. Under his influence, the heavily chained crow suddenly retracted. But it was still too slow when compared to the conduction of electricity at the speed of light. It was because of this slowness that an inconceivable marvel unfolded before Luo Nan's eyes. Amidst the blinding lightning, he saw a tree that had suddenly grown. Its roots grew within the power station, and its trunk followed the flow of electricity to ram into the central control system. Then its countless luxuriant branches cut into the various system modules. The laboratory that was as silent as death came alive in an instant. An innumerable amount of electrical signals converged from each system module before being transmitted densely. The direction of the signals was clearly towards the heavily chained crow that was already trapped within the enormous tree. It was also clearly towards Luo Nan's side. Chapter 49. Genius, 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Showa, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. The most tragic epileptic patient in history? It was as if Luo Nen could already see his miserable end in this instant. Love, Gob Small, say, This also reflected a deeper understanding of his. The structure of the long line at this moment was like a huge neuron. As the basic signal processing unit of the human body, the ideal model of the neuron was almost the shape of a tree. The branching branches are the dendrites that receive information. The main part is the axon that transmits information. The axon endings of the anterior neuron were similar to the roots of a large tree. They then contacted the dendrites of the posterior neuron to realize the conduction of neurotransmitters and electrical signals. Just like at this moment, the tree growing between the various system modules in the laboratory was collecting a massive amount of electrical signals from the various system modules and transmitting them. The problem was that this large neuron had a different structure compared to a normal neuron. It did not realize autonomous operation. Instead, it used its roots as an external source of energy. The end point of the transmission of information became the heavily chained crow that fused with the main trunk. In fact, it was Luo Nan. In a certain sense, the large neuron that was the incarnation of the long thread was like an external artificial organ for Luo Nan. This was a very magical thing. If it was used well, it would have endless potential. However, the information transmission mode of large-sized neurons was much more violent than that of normal neurotransmitters. Hundreds of millions of electrical signals swarmed in. No matter who it was impossible for them to process such a huge amount of information that passed through the same route at the same time. Luo Nen tried to sever the connection with the heavily chained crow, but how could this sort of subtle connection on the mental plane be so easily severed? It was as if he could already see himself drowning in the electrical signals and suffering from convulsions in an instant. However, what Luo Nan waited for wasn't a flood of electrical signals a second later. Instead, it was a bright and familiar interface. The central control room lit up, but it wasn't the brightly lit kind. The energy and information controlled by the large-sized neurons were presented in a rather restrained manner. An exquisite and peerless transformation was completed between the enormous amount of photoelectric signals. The results were transmitted to the enormous screen in front of Luo Nan. What was displayed on the giant screen was none other than the flexible e-ink interface that had accompanied Luo Nanda for 5 years. Without a doubt, this was another masterpiece of the long line. On the small screen of the bracelet, and on the giant monitor screen that spanned half the room, it used this method to announce its existence. Luo Nan was a bit stupefied when facing the enormous flexible e-ink screen interface. At this moment, what he saw was not only the flashing interface, but also the operating principles behind it. The structure of the large-sized neuron was full of the flavor of bionics. As a nerve cell, it naturally had the basic structure of a cell body. Through the heavily chained crow, Luo Nan discovered this region at the junction between the main trunk and the branches of the large tree. This was the first place where the tremendous amount of electrical signals were transmitted back from the lush branches. Functions that Luo Nan was unable to explore were integrated here. But at the very least, it had the functions of analysis, filtering, transcoding, and compiling. It was like a set of processor chips, or perhaps it was an auxiliary subbrain. First, it transformed the enormous amount of signals into something concise, clear, and easy to understand. Only then did it truly return to the central control system and Luo Nan's brain. This prevented massive amounts of information from damaging the brain, truly realizing the incredible function of an external neuron. This was not some fantastical thing, but a real operating mechanism. Love, go, small, say, neck the information technology involved in the conversion of mental and material signals, the interaction technology between man and machine, was undoubtedly something that people could only look up to. Was this a level that Earth's technology could reach? Luo Nan pondered for a while, but he still didn't gain anything. He could only return his attention to the interface that he could understand. At first glance, the flexible e-ink screen's interface was still the same style, but there were still some changes. The interface that Luo Nan used was always very refreshing. There weren't many applications that he chose. For example, he usually only used the flexible e-ink screen to surf the web, draw, read ebooks, and so on. He didn't download any extra applications. There were exactly 8 application icons on the main interface. Among them were the 5 basic functions of the system: time, calendar, video player, browser, and settings. Luo Nan downloaded the file editor, and his cousin's group forced him to download the popular communication software on the market. Finally, there was the drawing software that had always existed. These application icons were arranged vertically, taking up 2 rows. There were 4 icons in each row. The layout was clear at a glance. But at this time, Luo Nan clearly saw a new icon on the enormous screen. It was a crisscrossed gear structure. If it weren't for the difference in color, it would have been mistaken for a classic setting icon. And the icon's logo was very direct. It was the word gear. The external neuron also had the ability to automatically download applications? Luo Nan's thoughts stirred slightly. The telepathic sensing he had experimented with before was actually still working. A new interface opened up, and a set of building plans and elevations appeared in front of Luo Nan. Luo Nan confirmed with a glance that this was, without a doubt, the building blueprints of gear. This was because the characteristics of this set of blueprints were far too distinct. No wonder it was called gear. The entire building had at least 100 circular spaces that could be seen. They were scattered in various locations of the 7-story building. And looking at the structure, there were indeed a few doors and entrances that were designed in the rack style. Just looking at the floor plan, the entire building was like a heavy machine. Every part of the building was connected together in a gear-driven manner, forming an inseparable whole. It was marvelous and exquisite. There was also a row of options on the left side of the interface. Right now, practically all of them were grayed out. None of them could be selected. Only the option at the very bottom was still filled with a full luster. The name of the option was quite strange. Observation platform. Luo Nan was unable to understand. A sound came from behind him right when he was baffled. Luo Nan's mind stirred, and the interface of the giant screen faded away. The central control room was restored to a darkness where one could not even see their fingers. It was unknown what kind of dream Xie Junping was having at this time. His hands and feet danced in joy, but he was completely unaware that he was sitting on a chair. He instantly lost his balance, toppled over, and fell down solidly. F***ck me. This time, Xie Junping actually woke up completely from the fall. He cursed and extended his hand to cover his head. He opened his eyes, but all he could see was darkness. He clearly hadn't come back to his senses. He shouted over there, "Turn on the lights." Luo Nan used his wristband, which was close to shutting down, to emit a bit of light, fulfilling Xie Junping's wish to a certain extent. In this sort of place, under this sort of lighting, the sudden glimmer of light and the silhouette of a face could really scare a person to death. Xie Junping drew in a breath of cold air and let out another cry. He had instinctively dodged, but he had bumped into the chair. Luo Nan didn't want to play around with pleasantries. He directly said, "Senior, it's good that you're awake. You were probably in a bad state just now, so you fainted. The laboratory detected that you lost consciousness, so they cut off your temporary privileges. The energy and life support systems have all stopped working. Take a look and see if your privileges have been restored."
Ah.
Xie Junping used 5 seconds of time to digest the information Luo Nan transmitted. He immediately quivered and finally woke up. He didn't have the time to ask how he fainted in the end. He immediately lit up his wristband and dealt with the issue of privileges. About 3 seconds later, Xie Junping kicked away the chair next to him with a loud bang. Then, he started cursing loudly. "Damn it. You said I need to reapply. Give me a fucking signal." Chapter 50. Genius, 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Forget it. I shouldn't have had high hopes for this system anyway. Love go small, say. Nekaluo Nan felt that his actions of hiding the interface just now were quite foolish. Fortunately, it was not too late to mend the pen after the sheep were lost. He sighed and knocked on the control panel, causing the giant screen in front of him to light up again. The light of the enormous screen elongated Luo Nan's shadow, causing Xie Junping's jaw to drop to the ground. "Brother Nan, you are a hacker?" Luo Nan didn't know how to explain, so he simply didn't speak. Xie Junping, on the other hand, grew excited all of a sudden. "My goodness. I heard that this system was strengthened by Quantum Corporation. Junior Nan, you can even order it around? Wasn't this guy's mood a little strange?" Luo Nan still remembered that Xie Junping had nearly fainted from fear. Before he fainted, Xie Junping had wailed at Luo Nan for mercy. But in this current situation, not only did Xie Junping's fear of Luo Nan completely disappear, even his fear of being trapped in a hopeless situation was reduced to a minimum. Could it be that he had lost his memory due to the shock? Or could it be that the effect of killing the burning wraith was really immediate? Luo Nan didn't come to a conclusion after a short period of pondering, so he put this matter to one side. He reopened the gear interface and focused on the observation platform option. Several seconds later, he pressed it with his mind. There were no changes on the interface, but there was a stream of information flowing through the heavily chained crow into his brain, allowing him to understand many things. Luo-nen muttered to himself for a bit before turning around. Let's go. Leave? Where are we going? Xie Junping looked around at the dark surroundings and didn't dare to move. But in the next second, a door automatically opened at the side of the central control room, leading to an even darker space. Love, go, small, say, Xie Junping blurted out. Secret passage? Turn on the light from the bracelet. Luo Nan's mind stirred, and the giant screen went out. The room was restored to a pitch-black darkness. Xie Junping exclaimed and hurriedly turned on the light on his bracelet, barely illuminating the road ahead. Since there was light, Luo Nan didn't say much. He directly headed in the direction of the newly opened door. Hey, this is a secret passage, right? Xie Junping lowered his voice and suppressed his nervousness as he followed closely behind. It's a corridor outside. Though the giant screen was extinguished, Luo Nan's large-scale external neuron was still controlling that portion of the resource. It transmitted effective information through the heavily chained crow and transferred it to his cranial nerves. The scene was directly mapped onto his retina. As long as Luo Nan's energy was enough to support the existence of the heavily chained crow, this electronic map would not lose its effectiveness no matter how far the distance was. Of course, without the heavily chained crow to guide the Wraith sign, and without the risk of his soul leaving his body, he had become blind in this darkness. He needed a source of light. Xie Junping had already understood the ruthlessness of the defense system from the bracelet. He was completely confused at this time. If it's not a secret passage, how did it open? It should be the original design of the builder. All the portals along the route we took were controlled by an independent power source. The people who modified it later obviously didn't notice this. Why is it so troublesome? Xie Junping shook the beam of light from his bracelet and looked around. Sure enough, he saw that there were public places like corridors along the way. Occasionally, he had to pass through one or two rooms, but there was no need to hide. It's probably a hobby. Luo Nan's brain incessantly flashed with the elevation and floor plan of gear. The tight structure and the peculiar design made him gasp in admiration at every moment. The layout of the entire building seemed to transform into a machine that could be activated at any time to process some product. Right now, he and Xie Junping were shuttling back and forth between the components of gear, carrying out a marvelous tour. With the external neuron controlling them, Luo Nan and Xie Junping were completely green all the way. They didn't encounter any obstacles. After passing through the stairs of the safety passageway, the two should have gone from the 4th underground floor to the 2nd underground floor. Though this place was still within the scope of the laboratory, it was clearly a public activity area. They swept past the beam of light, and they even saw a bar counter, a sofa, and so on used for resting. What a weirdo. Xie Junping finally put an end to his conjecture regarding the secret passage. He once again greeted the strange hobby of the builder. In any case, Xie Junping's state of mind grew more and more relaxed as they walked through the darkness because of this weirdo. He also dared to carry out his duty as a lamplighter. He took the initiative to go to the front and illuminate the place. If there really was some sort of secret passage placed in front of him, it would be debatable whether or not he would have the guts to make his way through. Hey, where do we go up ahead? Xie Junping's beam of light swept across a wall. It followed the wall, and the outline of the resting area retracted in an arc.
It seemed to be the end.
Before Luo Nan could respond, the beam of light suddenly swept across a signboard. It immediately locked onto the signboard. Xie Junping stood still in a single step and fiercely slapped his thigh. I know where this is. Luo Nan followed the beam of light and looked over. He saw that the signboard displayed an underwater scene in a hand-drawn style. Fishes swam amidst the aquatic plants. The scene was all the more vivid under the flickering light. Where is this? The Sandbar Waterway. It's a very famous scenic spot in Gear. From here, Xie Junping used the beam of light to sweep across a sealed door. Just enter from here all the way to the withered tree sandbar 700 meters away. A long underwater corridor was built there. The middle of the corridor passes through half a swamp and a small lake. It's a good place to get close to the underwater ecology of the wetlands. After a simple introduction, Xie Junping began to gossip again. I heard that this underwater corridor existed before the construction of gear. However, someone used the crime of destroying the ecology to sue them. The construction party nearly lost their pants, allowing the Order Society to pick up a great bargain. When they constructed gear, they deliberately connected it together. Of course, they have to pay quite a bit of taxes every year. Luo Nan found the most crucial information from Xie Junping's string of nonsense. You're saying that there's a sandbar over there? Yeah. It's a very famous place. It's said that it's the best place to view the entirety of gear's construction. Luo Nan nodded to himself. Is this why it's called the observation platform? Xie Junping finally reacted at this time. He slapped Luo Nan on the shoulder in excitement. Junior Nan, aren't we free now? We just need to get to the sandbar. F***CK the signal. F***CK. Xie Junping suddenly cursed again. Luo Nan was baffled. What's wrong now? It seems bad. Luo Nan couldn't see Xie Junping's expression clearly, but his voice was a bit panicked. I remember that the water level of the wetlands rose a few years ago. The sandbar was completely submerged. Right now, there's a crooked, withered tree sticking out of the water. Hiss. The Order Society wouldn't have sealed the exit over there, right? Luo Nan confirmed the route and confirmed that it was just as Xie Junping said. They needed to pass through the underwater corridor. He hadn't discovered any abnormalities so far. We'll know once we go over there and take a look. Luo Nan directly opened the entrance to the underwater corridor. A slightly fishy smell of water assaulted his face. It was probably the result of many years of soaking. Xie Junping sent out a beam of light in a perfectly straight line, but it was impossible to illuminate the end. This long corridor was the same as the building as a whole. It was clearly curved. Chapter 51. Genius, 1 second remember if you want to go. Speak, net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. The two walked shoulder to shoulder into the long corridor. It was still extremely dark and quiet, but the effect was completely different from the deathly stillness of the laboratory. Even though it was dark, they could see rippling water waves within the murkiness as they walked along the long corridor. A tiny amount of sunlight was refracted within the water. It was extraordinarily vivid. There were also faint sounds transmitted from the glass walls on all 4 sides. The underwater life forms were affected by the light. They came one after another, scraping against the glass walls. The quieter it was, the louder it was. There was one time when Xie Junping couldn't hold back his curiosity. He shot a beam of light into the water and illuminated an alligator. Xie Junping saw the malevolent head crash against the glass wall with a rumble. He instinctively dodged, but he collided fiercely against the other side of the wall. The collision caused tears to flow out. He became much more well-behaved from then on. No matter what, he had to walk along the center of the long underwater corridor. He even took the initiative to lower the brightness of the lighting. In the end, he arrived at the end of the long corridor without any danger. There was clearly a bend here. Xie Junping walked to the corner, trembling with fear and trepidation. He used his wristband to illuminate it, and what entered his eyes was a thick and heavy alloy door. He looked at the series of steel bolts that came down from above, and his entire body felt unwell. Xie Junping threw himself over and fiddled with it for a long time. In the end, he fiercely kicked the door 3 times, but only muffled thuds rang out. It was clear that the place had already been filled with water, soil, and sand. He thought of the most important matter and lowered his head to look at the signal. It seems like there's a bit. There's only a meter or 2 between here and the ground. The problem was that the water and soil layers were mixed together. It possessed an extremely powerful electromagnetic shielding effect. Xie Junping's wristband could be considered quite powerful, but it was still very hard for him to receive a clear signal. Xie Junping tossed and turned until his forehead was beaded with sweat. Luo Nan shifted his gaze to other locations in the long underwater corridor. He followed the electronic map on his retina and felt his way along the seemingly seamless inner wall. His actions were far too obvious. Xie Junping, who had suffered setbacks time and time again, was attracted over. He copied Luo Nan and lightly knocked on the inner wall, but he couldn't hear anything at all. There weren't any hidden doors along the way. There's no need to break here. Those architectural designs are quite arrogant. Xie Junping's words were very insightful. In fact, the path on the electronic map that Luo Nan obtained ended at the sealed alloy door. There were no other directions. Luo Nan also tried to remotely control this door, but this was clearly a clumsy and purely physical isolation. It was completely immune to all advanced electronic remote control technology. But he did not give up. Because there was one thing that couldn't be explained no matter what. Why didn't the other system modules in the laboratory have any reaction on the external neurons interface? Only the functions of gear and the observation deck were clearly displayed? According to various information, the route of the observation deck was set up before Yan Hong established his laboratory. Was it a natural fit, or was it a deliberate modification later? If the subsequent modifications were so ingeniously different from Yan Hong's laboratory design, was there some kind of targeting? Along the way, they had been in the most ordinary public places. It seemed that only at the end of this corridor would there be some hidden spaces. If there really was a problem, it would be here. Luo Nan pondered for a moment before decisively ending his infiltration of the laboratory's system modules. He withdrew the heavily chained crow. It was worth mentioning that the external neuron had a higher priority with his mental connection. Once the heavily chained crow retracted, the external neuron transformed back into a long line of electricity and returned to his brain. Love, go small, say, Netku, what an inconceivable object. Luo Nan shook his head. He didn't want to waste too much time on this for the time being. Instead, he operated the heavily chained crow and drove the wraith sign to sweep and slice this area vertically and horizontally. All of these physical barriers were completely meaningless to the heavily chained crow and the wraith sign. Got it. Luo Nan suddenly raised his head to look at the alloy steel plate above him. 95% of the material that formed this underwater corridor was tempered glass. Only the two ends were fixed with metal. Normally, no one would pay attention to this. But when the heavily chained crow swept past, the material at a certain location above was clearly completely different from the alloy steel plate and tempered glass. Hey, where are you looking at? Xie Junping noticed Luo Nan's abnormality. He raised his head to look, but he didn't discover anything. Luo Nan ignored him. He just earnestly estimated the height and angle. He should still be able to reach it. Excuse me. Luo Nan swung Xie Junping aside and retreated 2 steps back. He ran with a boost and stomped heavily on the metal door. He borrowed the force to soar up a bit, and at the same time, he half-twisted his body and extended his hands upwards. The place where the alloy steel plate should have been had inexplicably transformed into something like mucus. It was just a bit of obstruction before it was broken through. And then Luo Nan's hands made contact with the edge of the actual steel plate. The collision was a bit painful, but his reaction was quite fast. He grabbed it and twisted his body a bit. He exerted strength from his waist and did a pull-up, and his body shot upwards. From Xie Junping's perspective, half of Luo Nan's body was submerged within the steel plate. Then Luo Nan's 2 legs swayed, and he disappeared without a trace. **CKME Mimicry film. Xie Junping's family had some business with the military. He was able to call out the name of this cutting-edge product in a single breath. This was truly a glimmer of hope at the darkest hour. It was worth celebrating. But here came the problem. It seems that I can't do this sort of high-difficulty leap and climb. Even with Luo Nan's help, Xie Junping still wasted at least 10 minutes in order to barely pass this checkpoint that tested his control. And when he truly made contact with the space above, he couldn't help but curse. Oh my God. So the secret passage was waiting here. Indeed, this was a narrow passageway that didn't even reach a meter in height and width. One needed to bend their knees and crawl in order to pass through. It was completely different from the entire route they had taken before. What happened to the designer's pride? This place should have been open later. It's different in front. Luo Nan had already done some scouting while Xie Junping was wasting time. He led people to crawl over right now, and soon they displayed a completely different style. When the horizontal narrow passageway ended, the structure suddenly flipped upside down. It became a vertical space. Though it wasn't very spacious, it was more than enough to accommodate 2 people at the same time. Most importantly, it was much more comfortable. Under the illumination of the light, a wooden stone staircase spiraled upwards. Though there was light shining down, they still couldn't see the end. They touched it. It was very moist, but it was very clean. The 2 climbed up the staircase. Xie Junping touched the inner wall with curiosity. It looks like tree bark. Hey, look at this position. Don't tell me we're inside a withered tree in the sandbar? Maybe. Luo Nan responded. The tree body should be filled with some sort of bionic material. It looks like it's close to decay, but it's actually extremely tough.
Wow.
This is a tree house. The symbolic plant of the withered tree sandbar is a tree house. Just what year and what month is this extravagant work? Holy crap. What the hell is this? Suddenly a black shadow rushed past Xie Junping's eyes, leaping straight into the base of the tree. The shadow itself wasn't that big, but its speed was quite fast. It was unknown which path it took, but there was a faint sound of water. Then there was no more sound. Chapter 52. Genius in 1 second. Remember Love Go? Speak, net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Xie Junping was frightened by the shadow and nearly fell down. He cut an extremely sorry figure, but he couldn't help but curse. Love Go small, speak, net. Luo Nan could see quite clearly due to the senses of the heavily chained crow. It's an animal from the swamp. It seems to be a muskrat. Are there any other entrances and exits besides the path we took to enter? Muskrats were a relatively common animal in the wetlands of Acumen College. Adult muskrats were 30 to 40 centimeters long, and their tails were 20 to 30 centimeters long. The one that just flashed past was much smaller. It seemed to be underage, but its movements were quite nimble. Xie Junping grimaced in pain. This place hasn't been idle for a year or 2. I'm afraid it's long since become a bird's nest or something. Be careful not to step on bird shit. He spat out the last word halfway before he forcefully swallowed it back down. The illumination beam just so happened to cut into a spacious area. One could see that the ring-shaped chair made the most use of the space. There were 2 stools placed casually. There were wall lamps embedded in the walls of the tree hole. There were also a few exquisite wall-hanging bookshelves and decorations. One could tell with a glance that this was a resting room. How big could a tree hole be? The usable area before their eyes definitely didn't exceed 3 square meters. It really couldn't even fit a bed. But the exquisite layout made the most use of the characteristics of the ring-shaped space in the tree hole. It gave off a rather relaxed and leisurely feeling. Xie Junping immediately forgot his previous words and clicked his tongue. You know how to enjoy yourself. Amazing. There's another floor above. Luo Nan pointed at the stone steps that continued to extend upwards and continued to walk. Why do I feel like this project isn't the least bit inferior to Gear? Especially after so many years. They're actually able to keep this a secret. Their mouths are too tight. Xie Junping followed Luo Nan as he climbed up. He had the tendency of turning from a hater to a fan. The 2 arrived at the upper floor as they spoke, which was also the top floor of the small tree hole. The layout here was a bit simpler. It even looked a bit spacious at first glance. There was only a table embedded in the wall of the tree hole. In front of it was a low stool modified from an irregular protrusion of a withered tree. The table was very clean. There was only a round tray placed on it. Xie Junping recognized it as the base of an old projector photo album. The projector probably ran out of power and went out. But as long as it was charged, it should be a very direct clue. Luo Nan was paying attention to the various areas within the tree hole. He fumbled around and pulled out a lot of brackets, braces, and other strange things, most of which were set up around the table. From their positions, it was obvious that this was a workshop. As long as the corresponding equipment was installed, It could handle ordinary research work. It was enough for a designer. Xie Junping watched from the side with interest. He also squeezed over to see if he could pull out any more airs. Luo Nan didn't squeeze with him. He moved to the opposite side of the table, to the most spacious area. There weren't any wall installations here, but if one looked carefully, there was a circle of irregular and narrow-veined patterns. It roughly circled an area of about a square meter. He reached out and touched it, exerting a bit of force from the left and right. The inner wall of the bark in this area was like an unfolded scroll, flipping open to both sides. The next moment, sunlight shone in. The change in the light made Xie Junping, who was on the other side, suddenly turn his head. In reality, he had been tossing and turning in the laboratory and the tree hollow cabin for more than half an hour. It was already around 6:30. Night had already descended in Xia City, and the sky outside was rather dusky. Within the gloomy wetland jungle, several hundred meters away, only a vague silhouette could be seen.
It was impossible to see clearly with the naked eye.
But Luo Nan didn't know why, but he had a very good feeling at this moment. Perhaps it was because he was on the observation platform? The information given by the designer of gear was already thoroughly clear. Xie Junping suddenly laughed out loud to the side. Signal? There's a signal. Luo Nan didn't pay attention to him. He continued to survey the distant gear through the observation window. The blurry scenery with the naked eye didn't count for much. His mind still contained the elevation and floor plan of the building, as well as the intuitive impression he had of a corner of the building. When all the elements converged together, Luo Nan suddenly felt that the distant building was like a civilization of the previous generation that had been washed away by time. Only a rusted outer shell was left behind in its confrontation with the mighty forces of nature, heavy and ancient. Traces of an unruly industrial order could be seen on every corner of the building. It was incompatible with the hazy natural environment, but a compromise was finally achieved within this boundless darkness. This sudden feeling made Luo Nan open his notebook in an instant. He used a fluorescent pen to draw lines, capturing the intuitive impression that assaulted his face. After Xie Junping cheered, he turned his head to see Luo Nan's actions. So, this person really did have a drawing fetish? But he felt a bit relieved in the blink of an eye. A person who was obsessed with a certain hobby like this shouldn't be a cold-hearted fellow. Xie Junping walked back with light hands and feet. He stuck his head out to take a look and saw that the surface of the paper was filled with simple and crude lines. If he didn't know the subject of the depiction beforehand, he absolutely wouldn't have connected Luo Nan's sketch with the jungle and the building before his eyes. But when the direction of the sketch became clear, he unexpectedly felt that it was quite interesting, especially the structure that seemed to distort within the waves of water. It seemed to manifest some sort of incorporeal power. All right, let's not call it Picasso. How about Van Gogh? Luo Nan's sketch was drawn with a quick hand. He quickly closed his notebook and sighed in satisfaction. Luo Nan already had an even stronger interest in this building. He couldn't help but ask, "Who's the designer of this place?" Xie Junping shrugged. "Then you've stumped me. This building has at least 20 years of history. I was still a little baby when it was built. You weren't even born yet. However, haha, everything is fine as long as there's a signal. The AI will certainly have the relevant basic information." Xie Junping's previous experience of crying out for help had clearly suffocated him badly. He gnashed his teeth as he connected to the internet and asked for temporary authorization from the student council. From this moment on, he held absolute power over this damned laboratory. Sooner or later, I'll stuff that old bastard Yan Hong in there. I'll let him have a good taste. It doesn't matter which gutter he hides in. Xie Junping finally restarted the various system modules he had experimented with during this time. He searched for relevant information and found the original design that had been stored in an electronic file, including the designer's signature. He used the powerful function of his wristband to create an AR effect, causing an image to appear out of thin air. Independent designer, Bo Qingwen. Wow, look at this signature. It seems to be a woman. The handwriting is very beautiful. Xie Junping turned his head to size up the furnishings in the treehouse. He didn't see any particularly obvious female style, but the exquisite and comfortable design of the resting room on the next floor seemed to be able to verify this. Xie Junping became a bit excited, but he didn't receive a response from Luo Nan. He turned his head to look, but he saw Luo Nan staring at the designer's name displayed on the holographic screen, as well as the handwritten signature. Luo Nan didn't move an inch. Luo Nan's breathing seemed to be completely frozen along with the surrounding air. Chapter 53. Genius, 1 second remember if you want to go. Speak Net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Nan. Junior Nan? Xie Junping called out in a probing manner, but he still didn't receive any response. Luo Nan stood in place in a daze. He finally moved after a dozen seconds. He looked around at the furnishings within the narrow space, once more. It was just that the coordination between his head and body seemed to have been completely lost. He was as stiff as a rusty machine. It was as if he could exhaust his last bit of battery at any moment and die here eternally. But in the end, Luo Nan was still able to control his body. He held onto the inner wall of the tree hole and slowly walked down the stairs. His mind was in a trance, as if he was sleepwalking. Xie Junping wanted to follow, but he stopped after some thought. He continued to operate his wristband and rummaged through the Order Club's database. Sure enough, there was something new. Bo Qingwen, a doctoral student of the 72nd Institute of Architecture and Design, a senior member of the Order Club. The electronic photo from the early days was of a delicate and pretty woman. It was very fitting with the layout of the treehouse. Perhaps it was because of the first impression, but Xie Junping felt that this woman's facial features were quite similar to Luo Nan's. He already had a 70 to 80% certainty in his heart. Right when he was pondering whether or not he should confirm it a step further, his wristband displayed a call. Xie Junping grinded his teeth when he saw the number. He opened his mouth and was about to start cursing when he thought of Luo Nan downstairs. He forcefully swallowed the curses back into his stomach. He carefully walked to the window and growled, "Husaner, you motherfucker want to kill me. You're still talking? What kind of bullshit is that protective system? Huh, a new investor? Are you sure? Here to take a look?" At this time, Xie Junping was a bit surprised, but he was able to control his emotions. He pondered for a moment and gave some instructions to the other side. In the end, he gave a solemn warning. "Remember, if something happens again, I'll smash your door." Xie Junping walked down softly and quietly after concluding this matter. He stuck his head out from the stairwell to look down. He didn't dare to turn on the lights. The tree hole was dusky. He only borrowed a bit of daylight to barely see Luo Nan standing in the center of the resting room. He could touch the four walls with a slight stretch of his hand. But for some reason, he maintained a rigid posture of touching but not touching. It was as if he wanted to embrace an incorporeal shadow in the darkness. In the end, Luo Nan's figure slowly fell down, gradually submerging into the darkness. Only his faintly trembling back could be seen, like the bottom of a flipped boat that could sink at any moment. Xie Junping didn't want to continue watching, so he quietly walked back and waited in front of the window. As time passed, the sky grew darker and darker. He couldn't help but scratch his head as he considered the information provided by Husaner. The sound of footsteps rang out while she was in a dilemma. Luo Nan appeared at the top of the stairs. His face couldn't be seen clearly due to the dim lighting. Xie Junping was delighted. He was just about to open his mouth when he discovered that Luo Nan wasn't paying any attention to him at all. Luo Nan was still like a wandering spirit. He walked all the way to the open table and hesitated for a moment. In the end, he extended his arm over and picked up the base of the round plate on the table. He entered into a daze again.
Fine.
Let's wait a little longer. Even Xie Junping's breathing slowed down. He just hoped that Luo Nan would return to normal soon. "Senior, I'll have to trouble you with something." The sudden voice startled Xie Junping. Truthfully speaking, he really wasn't used to Luo Nan's gentle tone. Moreover, Luo Nan's voice was a bit hoarse and nasal. Could it be that he was crying? There was a subtle mismatch between the Luo Nan before his eyes and the Luo Nan in his memories. Xie Junping was a bit stupefied, but Luo Nan taking the initiative to communicate with him was a good thing. He went twice and hurriedly responded, "Go ahead. Go ahead. Love go little, say, Netku. I've already submitted an application to the Order Club. I'll have to trouble Senior to approve it." Okay. No problem. This was the reason why Xie Junping dragged Luo Nan over. Naturally, he had prepared this long ago. Right now, Junior, you're a new member of the Order Club. Including you, the club currently has a total of 13 members. Of course, you don't need to worry about the others. They'll be expelled from school at the very least. It's just a few procedural requirements for the club's operations. You'll need to put in a bit of effort for the next 2 days. I'll accompany you for a lap. Xie Junping's head was lowered as he spoke, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He raised his head and saw Luo Nan turn to face him, bowing over 90 degrees. Xie Junping was so shocked that he nearly fell out of the viewing window. He hurriedly helped Luo Nan up. "Oh my. Junior Nan, what are you doing?" Luo Nan looked straight at Xie Junping's face and spoke softly. "Today, Senior took the initiative to introduce me to the club. Only then did I have the chance to know that my mother still had this work gear when she was alive. I was even able to see her former residence." Xie Junping was a bit embarrassed. "This is a coincidence. It's not like this. My mother had already passed away when I was born. Before I could remember anything, my grandfather had gone mad, and my father had left. My other family members didn't know much about my mother. Therefore, 16 years of time couldn't compare to today's understanding of my birth mother. No matter what Senior did in the past, I, Luo Nan, will never forget this favor." Luo Nan spoke in a genteel manner, but each word was solemn. Each word was true. Xie Junping really couldn't stand this proper and serious attitude. Plus, he felt that Luo Nan's current mental state was a bit abnormal. He pondered for a long time before finally asking cautiously, "It really is Auntie?" Luo Nan nodded slightly. He didn't know what method he used, but he charged the projector photo frame with electricity. Right now it could be turned on normally, displaying a picture of a woman in her daily life. It seemed that she was right under this withered tree. Back then, the water level of the wetlands had yet to submerge the sandbar. She was dressed in simple and casual attire. She leaned lightly against the withered tree, pointed at the camera, and had a bright and radiant smile. She was a bit more lively and vivid than in the file photo, and she possessed a unique sense of self-confidence and sharpness. Xie Junping didn't feel good in his heart when he thought about how such a talented and beautiful woman had died young.
He didn't know what to say for a time.
He could only console her dryly. Andy passed away early. She didn't leave many things behind. Junior, you were able to find this inheritance. This is a great thing. You should be happy. It was only at this time that Xie Junping suddenly remembered. The Luo Nan before his eyes was only a 16-year-old youth. After stripping away his usual cold and hard outer shell, what was revealed was only a heart riddled with scars because of the death of his father and mother and the shattering of his family. All right, this was too sour. But Xie Junping really found it hard to get used to this, especially when he saw Luo Nan's situation. He hated that he couldn't stay here tonight. This wouldn't do. Xie Junping gritted his teeth and tried to communicate with Luo Nan. "Junior Nan, there's a problem right now. In the past, Gear was mainly occupied by the Construction Society and the Mystic Arts Research Society. But now a new financial backer has suddenly appeared. He's determined to get Gear. Today, he's coming over to investigate the scene. I've joined the society. Can they kick me out?" They won't go that far. Then it's fine." It was very clear that the current Luo Nan's entire mind was immersed in the emotions of remembering his mother. He didn't care about any other news, including the Mystic Arts Research Society. Xie Junping suddenly felt very tired. "Weren't you the one who came up with the ideas before?" Inexplicably, it was now his turn to rack his brains with all his might. He checked and filled in the gaps, including reminding Luo Nan to pay attention. "The problem is that there's only one way to get out of here. We can't let those people block us here." Chapter 54. Genius, 1 second remember if you want to go? Showa, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Luo Nan was stupefied when he heard this. He finally understood the most crucial problem. He looked around the treehouse and was silent for a few seconds before he finally made a decision. Let's go back first. Looking at the projection album in his hand, he hesitated for a long time before putting it back in place to avoid destroying the original layout of the treehouse. He then closed the bionic bark on the viewing window to make sure that no one would discover it. Luo Nan's gaze turned to Xie Junping after he finished doing all this. Xie Junping immediately raised his hand and swore, "I will absolutely not mention the treehouse to outsiders. This matter will rot in my stomach." Luo Nan didn't say a word. He just bowed once more. Ever since Luo Nan had solemnly expressed his thanks last time, Luo Nan had displayed an even more respectful attitude towards Xie Junping. Frankly speaking, this made Xie Junping quite happy in his heart. Luo Nan was the first to walk down with Xie Junping following behind. Perhaps it was because he was in a refreshed mood, but an inexplicable idea popped up in Xie Junping's mind. He borrowed his courage to poke Luo Nan's shoulder. "Brother Nan, if you don't mind, can I leave a camera?" "Huh?" Luo Nan suddenly turned around and stared at his face. A person's mentality was strange. In the past, Xie Junping would definitely be nervous at times like this, and he might not even be able to speak a complete sentence. But after feeling Luo Nan's respect, his courage rose correspondingly. His train of thought became clearer under Luo Nan's gaze. "I mean, Brother Nan, don't you think this house is a bit too clean? There were many mosquitoes in the wetland, and it was very humid. If it was not cleaned up for a few days, it would be impossible to see. But look at this place. It's clean and refreshing. Of course, it's beautiful, but I'm afraid." Luo Nan's eyes didn't blink at all. He spoke with a hoarse voice, expressing Xie Junping's unspoken meaning. "Someone has already discovered this place, and they've been living here for a long time? Ahem, I'm just saying. Love go small say, Neku after all, there's an 80% chance that Gear's AI cleaning system won't be able to reach here." Luo Nan didn't speak again, but his gaze drifted a bit. It was unknown what he was thinking. After a few seconds, he turned around and slowly walked down. His fingers were stuck to the inner wall of the tree hole until he reached the beginning of the stone steps. "It's here. There used to be a door here, but now it's been filled with bionic materials and sealed." Xie Junping shone the light on the surface and observed it for a while before agreeing. Maybe this is a normal door left behind when the sand continent was still around. Then the water level rose, and it was destroyed. "The water level is rising." Luo Nan's voice grew hoarser and hoarser. It was as if a blade was stuck in his throat. It became more and more difficult for him to speak. "When did the water level rise?" Xie Junping went online to search for information. "Around 1987. At that time, the underground rock strata had ruptured, and an underground river had changed its course, causing the average water level of the wetland to rise by nearly half a meter. The lake area where the withered tree sandbar was located had risen by a full 7 meters. 87 years. It seemed that senior sister Bo Qingwen had died due to a difficult childbirth, which happened 80 years ago. In any case, it was impossible for her to remodel the tree hole 7 years later. Once his thoughts were sorted out, Xie Junping hissed, "There really is someone." "Yes, there really is someone." "Who is it?" Luo Nan responded with a hoarse voice. He slowly bent down and touched the narrow secret passage that was clearly excavated later. Xie Junping came to a realization. There was also this passageway. There was a 99% chance that it was excavated at the same time as the ceiling of the door. It was also done to avoid the rising water level and make it easier to enter and exit. This explained the difference from Bo Qingwen's original design. Xie Junping saw Luo Nan bend over, seeming to be pondering over the structure of the secret passage. He shone a light beam to make it easier for Luo Nan to investigate. But when the light beam shone over, Luo Nan realized something was wrong. Right now, Luo Nan was indeed pondering, but his fingers were unconsciously digging at the junction between the tree hole and the secret passage. This monotonous movement was not so much a result of inertia, but rather a representation of extreme emotions. Before, Luo Nan was heavy and sad, but he was relatively calm. His occasional ups and downs were like the night tide of the seaside. It was the rhythm of normal emotions. But right now, he was suppressed and irritable. He was like a wounded beast that saw the enemy that injured him intrude into his territory. He was filled with irritation and even savage emotions. Xie Junping was really worried that Luo Nan would dig out his fingernails. He gingerly shook the light beam. The change in light startled Luo Nan, and he suddenly turned his head. Xie Junping shockingly saw that Luo Nan's eyes were blood red right now. The blood red wasn't from soaking in tears, but from the accumulation of berserk emotions. It was as if he wanted to devour someone. Xie Junping felt his calf cramp when he saw this. He unconsciously took a step back. However, Luo Nan's emotions seemed to have calmed down a bit under the illumination of the light. He stopped his monotonous, hair-raising movements and spoke in a low voice. "Senior, where were we just now?" There's someone living in the tree hole." They sealed the front door and even dug out a secret passage that leads to the laboratory. Luo Nan shook his head. The underwater corridor is a dead end. It's normally completely unobstructed. It's too conspicuous for outsiders to come in. Therefore, it can't be anyone else. It can only be an internal member of the society or the laboratory. Xie Junping thought about it and agreed. This made more sense. But when he thought deeper, there was such a person in the Order Club. He normally lived and socialized within the club. But when no one was paying attention, he would quietly pass through the underwater corridor and enter the tree hole. He would engage in some shady business. The most important thing was that this span of time could have lasted for 7 to 8 years. 10 years. All the way until now. Just thinking about it made Luo Nan's heart go cold. Xie Junping suddenly had a thought. Motherfucker. It can't be that someone suddenly came in from the other side while they were drilling the secret passage. Or maybe they could swim and come in from the viewing hole. The thought was born. He looked at the pitch-black entrance of the secret passage and the spiraling staircase behind him. His entire body felt unwell. Luo Nan didn't seem to think too much. He slowly stood up and bowed towards Xie Junping. "I'll have to trouble Senior with the matter of the camera installation. If there's still someone, I want to see just who in the world it is." Xie Junping was actually a bit flustered in his heart. But having Luo Nan by his side was more or less comforting. He took a deep breath. "Okay. I'll install it right now." "You have ready-made tools?" I brought a bit." Xie Junping was a bit embarrassed, but he still took out 2 miniature cameras the size of rice grains from his wristband. This group of second-generation rich kids would sometimes play with absurd tricks. They relied on these. This sort of portable miniature machine couldn't be any simpler to install. They just needed to find a position with a relatively wide field of view, press it, and it would stick. It wouldn't fall off easily. Xie Junping used both cameras. This little toy can achieve real-time video transmission. A single camera can work for over 3 months. Actually, looking at the degree of cleanliness, if we're lucky, we should be able to get results in a day or 2. While Xie Junping was working, Luo Nan walked up and down the entire treehole space. But he didn't discover any more clues. His mood was clearly even more depressed right now. He didn't say a word as he made his way through the secret passage and entered the underwater corridor. Xie Junping followed cautiously. He kept the surveillance screen open at all times for fear that a murderer who had been hiding for many years would suddenly jump out from behind him. Chapter 55. Genius, 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Jumping down from the secret passage, Xie Junping looked up. The camouflage film blocked his line of sight perfectly, making him look like a piece of alloy steel. Who would have thought that there was a short and narrow secret passage that led to this strange tree-hole space? Luo Nan didn't say a word. He silently made his way back. Xie Junping glanced at the surveillance screen once more. He hurried 2 steps to walk shoulder to shoulder with Luo Nan. But soon, he regretted his decision. At this time, all the system modules in the laboratory had returned to normal. When they returned, it was no longer dark. Inside the glass wall, under the special black light, the dark purple light made this area of water look dreamy and illusory. But to Xie Junping, this long and tedious road was simply torture. The mental state of Luo Nan next to her was abnormal. Along the way, Luo Nan continued the oppressive and impatient state he had in the tree hole. He was constantly spinning in circles in his own thoughts. Sometimes, he would stop abruptly and turn his head to look at the long corridor behind him, as well as the increasingly gloomy waters beside him. He would be in a daze for a long time. Every time this happened, the blood-red color in his eyes would be bright and glistening, making it hard for others to look at him directly. There were even several times when Xie Junping could hear the sound of his teeth clenching. After walking and stopping for a few minutes, Xie Junping became even more certain. Luo Nan was about to go crazy. He didn't doubt in the slightest that if someone dared to say, "I'm the person who lives in the tree hole right now," Luo Nan would immediately pounce over and tear that person's throat to shreds. Then he would roar and interrogate, "What the hell are you doing over there?" What was he thinking? If this continued, Xie Junping felt that he would go crazy. Something had to be done. Xie Junping racked his brains to recall some of the communication classes he had attended. He tried to think of a way to express himself. After hesitating for a while, he finally said, "Junior brother, do you know very little about Auntie?" Luo Nan was clearly stupefied. His circle of self had been broken, and this power came from the nostalgia he had for his mother. This wondrous emotion was like a surging river that washed over his heart. It was slightly painful, but it wasn't bad. A long time passed before Luo Nan nodded. "Yes, very few. There's a way." Xie Junping was overjoyed and continued, "Ani doesn't have any relatives?" Luo Nan continued to respond, "My mother was a war orphan. She grew up in an orphanage." Xie Junping almost choked, but after calculating the time, Bo Qingwen was indeed born before the Third World War. There were many such situations in that generation. No matter what, the conversation had finally begun. "Is it in the local area? If you want to gather more information, Junior, I have some power in Xia City." Xie Junping took charge again, and the results were actually pretty good. Luo Nan bowed towards him. "Thank you, Senior." Here it comes again. She felt that Luo Nan was like a person from the previous century. Or perhaps he acted completely according to the patterns of the books.
Yep.
Perhaps this was the case. It was just that his cold face matched well with his actions, giving people the illusion that he was relatively mature. Thinking of this, Xie Junping was even more confident about this exchange. He waved his hand and said, "Actually, I really admire Auntie. To be able to single-handedly design gear, and even after more than 20 years, people are still fighting over it. I even thought it was the masterpiece of some great master. This is also the first time I've heard of it." "Then, Brother Nan, what did you know before? Didn't your family mention anything about Auntie?" The sudden silence nearly made Xie Junping think that he had outsmarted himself. But in the end, Luo Nan still opened his mouth. "Mom passed away before I was born. You said it before." Hold on. Why did these words sound a bit strange? Before Xie Junping could think it through, he heard Luo Nan speak. "Mom and him met at Acumen College. They went together to the wilderness and met up with my grandfather. At the time, my aunt had a terrible relationship with them. She knew very little." Luo Nan's words were a bit incoherent, and there were some subtle references. Xie Junping was able to understand after combining the information he had gathered before. Luo Nan's parents probably met and fell in love while studying at Acumen College. They went together to the wilderness to assist Luo Nan's grandfather in his research. And at the time, Luo Nan's current guardian, his aunt, didn't have a good relationship with his family. She didn't know much about the relevant circumstances. It was naturally hard for Luo Nan to obtain relevant information about his mother when his grandfather was insane and his father was missing. Luo Nan subconsciously reached out his hand as he spoke. His fingertips made contact with the glass wall, emitting a muffled sound of friction. I only knew one thing about my mother since I was young. She passed away before I was born. It was these words again, and a strange feeling emerged once more. Xie Junping pondered back and forth twice before he finally realized what the problem was. How could she have given birth to a child when she was already dead? He had heard that in the past, when medical conditions were relatively backward, there were cases of misfortune and dystocia. The mother had already passed away, but the child was still preserved. Luo Nan was probably like this? Xie Junping believed that he had understood the crux of the matter. He was just about to continue the topic when he saw Luo Nan pull out a highlighter pen from his black notebook. He drew an oval-shaped cabinet on the glass wall. A slender silhouette of a person sat next to it. The lines of the drawing were simple to the extreme, but the content expressed was extremely straightforward and clear. "This is my mother." Luo Nan's voice was strangely gentle. "I've never seen her with my own eyes, but I've heard people say that this is how she gave birth to me."
Huh?
Xie Junping was a bit confused. It said that it was June 80. I was 7 months old. I was in my mother's stomach. The base was in chaos, and my mother was heavily injured. She sealed off the laboratory and used the only health pod inside to save me. "Look, I'm here." Luo Nan drew a small circle on the oval, which was the center of the health pod. Xie Junping opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Actually, he originally wanted to ask how a fetus was placed in the health pod inside the stomach. But when the words reached the tip of his tongue, he suddenly understood the tragic process. He was stupefied in place all of a sudden. Luo Nan lightly pressed the edge of the silhouette. His tone was still so gentle that it was frightening. "I can't see her, but she's always been here. This is my mother." Xie Junping looked stupidly at the fluorescent lines. He didn't know how to respond for a time. Luo Nan walked forward and changed to a different area. He drew a few more lines, borrowing the illumination of the black light to form an oppressive shadow. At the front of the shadow was a prism-like structure. A person sat upright inside, and next to him was a small figure. 3 years later, my grandfather was sued, imprisoned, and went crazy. The laboratory was gone, the experimental materials were gone, and the research results were gone. At this time, a certain someone was gone as well. Luo Nan gave Xie Junping a strange smile. "He should be here, but he's not. This is my father." They just happened to walk to the starting point of the underwater corridor at this time. Luo Nan put away the fluorescent pen and bowed towards Xie Junping once more. "I just said some senseless words. I've troubled you, senior." Clearly, Luo Nan understood Xie Junping's thoughts. Conversely, Xie Junping was finally able to peek into a corner of Luo Nan's tortuous and gloomy inner world. Moreover, Luo Nan's emotions were clearly much calmer. This could be considered a contribution. Xie Junping let out a secret breath. Right when he was about to respond, the voices of people came from not too far away. 7 or 8 people crowded into the surrounding resting area of the underwater corridor. Some people even greeted Xie Junping. "Brother Ping, we're here." Chapter 56. Genius, 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Speak. Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Xie Junping frowned as he looked over. Hu Huaying of the Student Council was among the people who came. He was also Hu San'er. He could be considered Xie Junping's best friend and ally. He was the one who greeted Xie Junping. In addition, there were 2 unfamiliar faces. The other 4 people were the upper echelons of the construction society. Even the society's president, Lang Ding, had come. Xie Junping suddenly had an ominous premonition when he saw this situation. Xie Junping grumbled in his heart, but he still put on a smiling face and went forward to greet them. This kind of social work was his forte. Moreover, he didn't need to face Luo Nan for the time being. He immediately felt the world open up to him. He could do as he pleased, returning from the hellish difficulty to the novice setting. Even though there were 7 people in front of him, he was still able to greet them with familiarity, without the slightest bit of confusion. He also inquired clearly about the identities of the 2 unfamiliar people. One was a lawyer with the surname Zhu. He was the financial backer's representative. His attitude was calm and indifferent. He had the aloof demeanor of a society elite. The other was a bodyguard. He had a dark skin and a swift and fierce body. He had a rather cool professional appearance. He ignored everyone. Both of them were people who had been working hard in society, and their ages were much older than the students present. It was reasonable to say that the school's society work office should send out a corresponding person to receive them in this kind of situation. Or perhaps a teacher consultant of the relevant society should come forward. But Xie Junping didn't see any of these. Xie Junping felt that something was wrong more and more. Soon, his premonition became reality. While he was exchanging pleasantries with lawyer Zhu, he directly said, "The Rainbow Fund is quite satisfied with the Construction Society's development plan and personnel composition. They are willing to carry out a more practical cooperation. Injecting capital to purchase a landmark building on the North Bank is also a pretty good investment. I hope to obtain the cooperation of the school and the student council in the relevant procedures and arrangements." Xie Junping laughed it off, but he had cursed Husaner 1,000 times in his heart. You can't even explain this kind of thing clearly. It's true that the new financial backer has arrived, but he's not directly entering the scene and starting from scratch. He's here to assist the Construction Society.
Damn.
I originally thought that the Twin Dragon Society was going to become the Three Kingdom Kill. But looking at the situation, it was clearly one-sided. He grinned. When he shook hands with Lang Ding, he said, "I won't mention anything else, but I have to say that I'm impressed by the Construction Society's ability to attract sponsors." As the chairman of a large society, Lang Ding was not a particularly domineering person. At this moment, he only smiled. "It's fine. Bringing in a new investor will make the society's capital structure more reasonable, and it will be easier to manage. Good luck." Xie Junping laughed and laughed, but in his heart he screamed, "Trouble." He turned his head to glance at Luo Nan. This master still had a downcast appearance. He didn't care about the group of uninvited guests at all. Indeed, according to Luo Nan's logic, as long as he was in the Order Club, within the building that his mother had designed, it didn't matter who took control of this place in the end. My lord, how could it be that easy? Xie Junping cursed inwardly, feeling a headache coming on. Whether it was the Construction Society or the Mystic Arts Research Society, none of these large-scale societies were easy to deal with. If you didn't do your job well beforehand, a small club member would have plenty of ways to make you lose your job. The reason why Xie Junping dared to guarantee Luo Nan before was because he had already given the Mystic Arts Research Society a heads up. The road ahead and the road behind were completely paved. As for the Construction Society, it really wasn't easy to handle. Lang Ding was easy to talk to, but the structure of this society was quite complicated. There were many thorns in the executive committee. Let's not talk about other things. That damned dog Li Xuecheng was the vice president of the Construction Society. He possessed a lot of influence within the society. If Luo Nan really entered the Construction Society and bumped into Li Xuecheng, wouldn't a mysterious campus death case occur? He had to think of a plan when he got back. Xie Junping didn't have the mood to stay any longer when his thoughts reached this point. He spoke a few more words of nonsense and pulled Luo Nan to leave. But who knew that lawyer Zhu of the Rainbow Fund would call him to a stop after just a few steps? "Head Xie, there's something I need to consult you about." Xie Junping was the head of the Society Activities Department of the Student Council, but there were very few people who directly addressed him by his title on campus. He was stunned for a moment before turning his head and putting on a smiling face. "Lawyer Zhu, please don't hesitate to ask." Lawyer Zhu nodded slightly. "It's related to the assets of the society. From the looks of things, the Order Club has already entered a state of idleness, and it will take at least 3 months to half a year to complete the procedures. This is quite unfavorable for preserving the value of the existing assets. Therefore, we suggest that we contact the competing society and hold a coordination meeting. We will officially count and seal all of the assets of the Order Club to reduce depreciation losses and avoid additional consumption. We hope that the Student Council will be able to coordinate and organize in the middle to complete the relevant procedures as soon as possible. Xie Juanping's brows furrowed. If you seal off the society, where will the master next to me go? Lawyer Zhu spoke without waiting for a response. In addition, we also hope that the school can conduct a strict examination of the procedures. We just paid attention to the Order Club Society website and discovered that a new member has actually entered the society. Can the society still recruit members during this period of lockdown? We need an explanation for the reason for joining the society during the auction of the society assets. *CK. This guy was specifically looking for trouble. Xie Juanping's face darkened in an instant. At the same time, he found it very strange. He didn't remember offending the Rainbow Fund or this litigator surnamed Zhu. Logically speaking, the Rainbow Fund was a very famous investment fund in Xia City. There was no need to be so stingy, right? He shot a glance at Luo Nan. Luo Nan had clearly heard Lawyer Zhu's words. He had already raised his head, but his gaze wasn't directed at the spokesperson. Instead, it fell onto the body of the dark-skinned bodyguard by Lawyer Zhu's side. Something was wrong. Although Xie Juanping didn't understand what was going on, he definitely wouldn't budge an inch on this matter. He replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lawyer Zhu might not know, but according to the school's procedures, the Order Club hasn't been dissolved yet. It's only managed by the school's student council. Its main function is still to maintain the club's normal operations. Recruiting members is also within reason. Lawyer Zhu smiled. All of the original members of the society have entered the detention process. It's hard to believe that the society can still operate normally. Otherwise, the school wouldn't have launched an asset auction. Based on the escrow agreement, our understanding is that the so-called escrow should be in a situation where the society has substantially disappeared, so as to fully realize the preservation of assets. If Minister Xie thinks that our understanding is wrong, we can also convene a coordination meeting to consult the opinions of other bidders, and we can choose the greatest common divisor. Xie Juanping was slightly stunned. He really didn't have the guts to hold that coordination meeting. Lawyer Zhu's gaze shifted to fall on Luo Nan's face. But then, he quickly exchanged glances with the dark-skinned bodyguard by his side. The latter nodded slightly before speaking. So this is the student Luo Nan who just joined the club? I just saw the announcement of your joining the club on the website. I'll take the liberty to ask. What's your reason for joining the club? Did you go through the relevant investigations? Did you have an understanding of the Order Club's circumstances before joining the club? Luo Nan held his notebook in his arms when faced with this interrogation. He was cold and quiet, not uttering a single word. But Xie Juanping couldn't bear to watch. He shouted, Hey. That's 3 sentences already. If you want a reason, ask me. Who knows better than me? Chapter 57. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Speak Net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Xie Juanping shifted the focus of the conflict back to himself, but in his opinion, perhaps he had saved Lawyer Zhu's life. When he thought of this, he felt a sense of superiority from a higher position. Lawyer Zhu, if you say that the Order Club continues to operate and recruit new members is a loss of resources, then I won't admit it. Do we students eat pig's feed? Husan, the Order Club's qualifications to recruit new members have just been restored in the new semester, right? Hu Huaying was a bit dizzy from the sudden intensification of the conflict. Xie Juanping had already dragged him into the water, and their many years of alliance hadn't been in vain. He immediately nodded. It was restored on September 1st. Xie Juanping was fully aware that this was a sign of a lag in the execution process, but he treated it as evidence and threw it at Lawyer Zhu's face. Perhaps Lawyer Zhu doesn't understand the internal situation of the school, so I might as well inform you. In the past few years, the Order Club has been courting disaster. Aside from last year's financial problems, there was also an experimental accident in 1993, and their membership qualifications were revoked. But this qualification was officially restored on September 1st this year. What does this mean? It means that the school still hopes to give the Order Club a chance, to let this old club that has existed since the school's founding preserve a bit of its mark. Even if it can't escape the fate of merging in the end, it won't completely disappear. At least there's still a legacy. Xie Junping originally didn't believe these absurd words, but the more he spoke, the more excited he became. He was even a bit moved, because at this moment, he suddenly thought of Bo Qingwen. He thought of this talented female senior who single-handedly designed gear. After leaving behind her iconic work, she left for the distant wilderness and then perished in such a tragic and stirring manner. A club that once possessed such an outstanding person had to leave something behind, to let people remember something. He was doing exactly this. And so, Xie Junping's voice grew louder and louder. A newcomer makes an application, and the club approves it. Isn't that normal? I see that this student's application is sincere, and his reason is sufficient. He himself is also very outstanding. What's wrong with allowing him to join the club during the escrow period? Lawyer Zhu had seen this type of expression where emotions were greater than reason many times. Young people always like to be like this. He smiled and shook his head. Reason sufficient? Can you tell me the specifics? If it was before, Xie Junping might have encountered awkwardness, but today was different. He laughed heartily. Of course it's sufficient. It's sufficient. He directly pulled out the blueprint from the society's database and showed it to everyone through the projection equipment nearby. Gear, which is also the building we are in, was designed by our school's Architectural Design Institute 72 PhD student, Ms. Bo Qingwen. The final construction was completed. This is the relevant electronic file, including Ms. Bo's personal signature. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Lawyer Zhu? Lawyer Zhu felt that something was amiss. He withdrew his smile and frowned. Xie Junping's heart skipped a beat when the black-faced bodyguard beside him glared at him coldly. This guy didn't look like a bodyguard, but more like an armed gangster. However, under the push of unprecedented emotions, Xie Junping quickly roused his spirit and boldly said, "Just by relying on this one work, gear, Ms. Bo Qingwen is the pride of our school." Unfortunately, Lady Bu passed away 6 years after completing this work. Unfortunately, the heavens were jealous of her talent. After that, Gear's personnel changed, and no one remembered that stunning senior sister from back then. Until today, Xie Junping walked with large strides to Luo Nan's side. He draped his arm over Luo Nan's shoulder. Until today, Lady Bu's only son, student Luo Nan, has followed in his mother's footsteps and entered Acumen College to study. After a month of searching, he found his mother's work from back then. But he witnessed the decline of the Order Club and the lack of maintenance on gear. He was heartbroken and took the initiative to join the society, to contribute all of his strength, to let this legendary building radiate its splendor once more. Is this reason enough? Luo Nan shot a glance at the palm on his shoulder, but he didn't say anything in the end. The most difficult person to please didn't have any objections. Xie Junping's imposing manner rose with the tide. Junior Lang, Lawyer Zhu. Even though we know that the Order Club is likely to become history, Lady Bu's contributions to the school and student Luo Nan's contributions to his mother's honor should receive the school's support and encouragement. Even though this is my personal opinion, I'll say it here. If you have any objections, you can doubt it. Suing is no problem. Suing the Student Council, the Alumni Association, the Parent Conference, the President's Office, and the Board of Directors is no exception. What's fake can't be real. What's real can't be fake. I really want to see who is able to sever the flesh and blood of Lady Bu and Junior Luo Nan, who is able to destroy the mother-son affection between them, who is able to trample the cultural inheritance of our school into the ground and ruin it. Xie Junping's imposing manner right now was truly earth-shattering. He glared and pointed at the irrelevant people. Junior Lang? Lang Ding smiled bitterly and waved his hand. He didn't want to clash with Xie Junping. Xie Junping looked at the most talkative person, Lawyer Zhu. Lawyer Zhu's face turned a bit green. He didn't respond immediately. It seemed that he was preparing his words. How could Xie Junping give him the chance? Right now his heart was carefree, indescribable with words. In the end, he just laughed out loud, put his arm around Luo Nan's shoulder, and swaggered off. This was an unprecedented victory. Xie Junping's eyes were practically brimming with hot tears before he had even walked a few steps. This was the first time he didn't look at the teleprompter. He didn't use his built-in earphones to give a passionate speech. Okay? The effects were simply explosive. It was a pity. It was a pity that he wasn't able to record it. He wouldn't be able to recollect it in the future. Hold on. Perhaps there was a way. Xie Junping turned his head and asked, Junior Nan.
My image this time.
Give me a drawing.
Sorry.
Only now did Xie Junping discover that he had forgotten himself in his excitement just now. He was still holding Luo Nan's arm and hadn't let go yet. Xie Junping immediately shrunk his neck and hastily pulled his hand back when this old man's cold gaze swept over him. Who knew that Luo Nan would give him a thumbs up in the next moment? Senior, you're eloquent. Xie Junping coughed. He wanted to be a bit reserved. I've seen this bunch of litigators many times. It's Auntie and Junior Nan who gave me the confidence. In the end, he couldn't help but grin and laugh loudly. He couldn't control his mouth in the end. Speaking of which, Junior Nan, just give me a drawing. It'd be a pity if you didn't keep it as a souvenir. Luo Nan actually didn't refuse. He just said, I'll go buy a flexible screen first. Xie Junping didn't expect Luo Nan to respond. He suddenly received this kind of response. He was stunned for a moment before becoming overjoyed. Actually, a portrait didn't count for much. But this represented that his friendship with Luo Nan had truly entered a new stage. He immediately slapped his chest. I'll buy this. No need. Thanks. Luo Nan laughed, but he quickly restrained himself. He lowered his head and flipped open the notebook. He went to the page of the flexible e-ink screen and looked at the cracked screen. A moment later, he opened the metal ring and removed the flexible e-ink screen. He weighed it in his hand and suddenly assumed a posture of wanting to throw it. Xie Junping was shocked to the side. He instinctively went to grab Luo Nan's arm. But who knew that Luo Nan himself would stop before he could exert his strength? He faced Xie Junping with a smile. Destroying hygiene isn't too good, right? Xie Junping fiercely nodded his head no matter what kind of craziness Luo Nan was having. He was fully aware of how Li Xueqing had turned into a dead dog. So, he could guess the importance of this flexible e-ink screen to Luo Nan. He couldn't help but worry that Luo Nan would make a choice that he would regret in the future due to his momentary emotions. If Luo Nan could figure it out by himself, then that would be for the best. Luo Nan muttered to himself for a moment. In the end, he placed the flexible e-ink screen back into the notebook and continued to walk forward. It was as if nothing had happened. Chapter 58. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Xie Junping's luxury car sped along the high-speed magnetic track. For a rich kid like him, a phantom being sealed was just an opportunity for the other collections in the garage to show themselves. Xia City had already entered the darkness of night outside the car window. It was rush hour, but the city was rarely congested. Over the past few decades, billions of tons of soil, steel, and other special materials had been used to build the magnificent metropolis according to the will of mankind. More than 200 million people were crammed into the limited land, but it could still operate efficiently. Just like transportation. From the ground to the sky, Xia City was divided into 20 layers of transportation. They were divided into hundreds of millions of different types of transportation. Even when the traffic was the most dense, it only took about 20 minutes to cover the 40 kilometers. Xie Junping volunteered to take Luo Nan home, so Luo Nan was happy and relaxed. He seized this time to familiarize himself with a newly purchased flexible e-ink screen, mainly the feel of the screen and the electronic pen. As for the other configurations, they were meaningless. When the external neurons seeped into it and connected to the battery module, the familiar interface that hadn't changed for 5 years appeared in front of him. However, the gear icon that still existed in the laboratory was nowhere to be seen, indicating that the special hardware and software foundation still had a certain impact on the external neuron. Luo Nan's finger stroked the original gear icon twice, then he opened the drawing software he hadn't used in a long time. At the top of the software interface was still the image of the burning wraith, and it still looked as malevolent and terrifying as before. But after experiencing the concise and abstract lines of the wraith sign, Luo Nan felt that this sketch was truly unbearable to look at. There were many mistakes and awkwardness. Shaking his head, he directly deleted the magical sketch and replaced it with the one that depicted the entrance of the nightclub. Hey. Delete this one as well. Change it to something prettier. Xie Junping just so happened to turn his head at this time. He only saw Luo Nan delete a picture, but he was unable to see the content clearly. Love, go, small, say, Nekka, however, he was very clear about what was going to happen next, so he immediately shouted. Luo Nan cast a glance at him and said in a lukewarm tone, "Pay attention to your driving. This is a high-speed magnetic track. How am I supposed to drive it?" Xie Junping put his hand on the steering wheel, but he received a warning from the car's AI, telling him to enter the conversion zone before adjusting the magnetic track to avoid a rear-end collision. Xie Junping had an innocent expression on his face. Luo Nan was disinclined to pay attention to him. He created a blank page on the drawing software and immediately put pen to paper. Xie Junping drew close with a whoosh. He saw Luo Nan use the digital pen to draw out the blurry shadows of the background. It was vaguely the internal layout of gear. Xie Junping was excited when he suddenly became stupefied. Who is he? That dark-skinned bodyguard? Why did you draw him? I've seen it before. Luo Nan sketched out the outline of the dark-faced bodyguard. He wanted to add a few fine strokes, but he was a bit hesitant. For him, this was a rather rare situation. Xie Junping was still a little unconvinced. Who is he? I saw it on the ship Lanshan yesterday. It's probably Quantum Corporation's burner. Xie Junping's chin smashed into his own shoulder. It should be. Back on the warship, it was this dark-faced man who dragged Quantum Corporation's deep blue walker armor. He drove past Luo Nan's side. The two of them made eye contact, and the dark-faced man even sealed his outer armor with a membrane, as if he was guarding against a thief. The process could not be considered pleasant. Xie Junping was drenched in cold sweat. It seemed that he had clashed with the dark-faced man's gaze when he was passionately giving his speech. If the dark-faced man were to slap him, his recently upgraded mouth would probably shatter into pieces. In comparison, Quantum Corporation's deterrent power wasn't as direct. Luo Nan just shook his head at Xie Junping's performance. He flipped over the page and put his pen to paper once more. This time it really was Xie Junping's image. Even though it was clearly a gift, Luo Nan didn't deliberately add more ink. It was the same as before, a few strokes, and the image appeared clearly. This person had his arm around Xie Junping's shoulder while waving his arm. He seemed excited, angry, and a bit crazy. But the arm around Xie Junping's neck and the shadow on his flank made this somewhat out-of-control action turn into a somewhat upright and unyielding guardian. Xie Junping was still yelling, "How could I be this crazy?" But after seeing the overall composition, he became happier the more he looked. This continued until he was grinning from ear to ear. He was satisfied to the extreme. In the end, there was only one point of dissatisfaction. That's you on the side, right? Why didn't you draw it? I'm not good at self-portraits. Luo Nan responded simply and immediately sent this picture over. He didn't care what Xie Junping did with it. And then Luo Nan selected the two new sketches he had drawn as well as the ones he had accumulated before. He pressed on the screen for a few seconds, and the second layer of the drawing software opened up. It was the true appearance. He had tried it yesterday in the confinement room of the warship and failed. Today he switched to a different machine, and everything went smoothly. The main body of the second layer was the tetrahedron on the title page of his grandfather's notebook. It was just that it didn't have an inscribed sphere or an outer-scribed sphere. Instead, it was divided into 5 roughly equal layers. It rotated within the gray background. Xie Junping's gaze shifted over. He was a bit curious. Maslow? This interface really did look very close to the diagram of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This theory arranged a person's needs from low to high, from basic to complex. It was like a staircase that was arranged into 5 layers. As long as one had a bit of common sense in sociology and psychology, they wouldn't be unfamiliar with this classical theory and related diagram from the last century. Xie Junping pointed and said, "From bottom to top. Physiology, safety, social interaction, respect, and self-realization? It's students, employees, technicians, clergymen, and politicians. So vulgar. I'm saying that these occupations can be arranged in a staircase?" Luo Nan didn't explain. Right now he had selected a dozen or so sketches, and they all moved into the enclosed space of the tetrahedron. There were at least several hundred similar artworks scattered within. Within the enclosed space, all the sketches were scaled down. They began to flip up and down as new sketches entered. It looked like a marvelous card set that was repeatedly shuffled and rearranged under the drive of the software. Several seconds later, the positions of the several hundred artworks within the card shuffling machine were determined. The vast majority of them were arranged in the bottom 2 layers. Occasionally there was a 3rd layer, but the 4th and 5th layers were all blank. I can play with them like tarot cards? A fortune teller? Which company made this software? Xie Junping was attracted by the marvelous changes in the interface. His mind was filled with questions. At the same time, he opened his eyes wide and strove to find his own image. "It's my father's work." Xie Junping immediately became honest. He roughly understood Luo Nan's temperament now. He knew that Luo Nan wouldn't be in a good mood as long as it was related to his father. Luo Nan was much quieter for the rest of the journey. The flying car arrived at Blue Bay Community at approximately 7:15. This was a bit later than the usual time to get home. Luo Nan bid farewell to Xie Junping and walked into the community. Soon a scratching noise rang above his head. The familiar rhythm indicated that it was ink greeting him. Luo Nan didn't raise his head as he walked into the apartment building's elevator. He opened his notebook after choosing his floor and stared at the flexible e-ink screen. He stared blankly at the special interface of the 2nd floor. Then he sneered. That coward would forever shrink his head and tail even though he was declaring his existence. The drawing software was like this. The external neuron was like this. The tree-hole space. Was it like this? Luo Nan didn't know, but the burning pain in his heart could not be clearer. The elevator reached the floor, and the metal door opened. Luo Nan closed his notebook with a bang and walked out with large strides. The home AI sensed his existence and opened the front door after confirming it. Luo Nan stepped inside, but he was slightly startled. The lights in the living room were on. A middle-aged lady was sitting on the sofa, handling business through her wristband. She raised her head when she heard the door open. She looked straight at him with an expressionless face. Chapter 59. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Showa, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Luo Nan immediately stood at attention. Aunt. The middle-aged lady on the sofa was Luo Nan's aunt, Luo Shuqing. She was small and thin, with a plain face and a quiet and serious temperament. Luo Nan hung his head as usual in front of this elder. "Auntie, you came from so far away?" "There's someone who just won't budge, no matter how much I ask. So, I came over to pay my respects." Mrs. Luo Shuqing's poisonous tongue was as sharp as ever. It immediately made Luo Nan speechless. It was only then that he realized why it was so easy to pass the inspection last night. His aunt had probably already made up her mind to come here for a surprise inspection. Well, that was my aunt's style. Luo Shuqing looked at her watch and stood up. "Let's go. Your uncle has already prepared dinner and is waiting for us." She didn't give Luo Nan any chance to object. Luo Nan still wanted to struggle a bit. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Since you know it's troublesome, don't go looking for trouble. Luo Shuqing walked to Luo Nan's side. She was a head shorter than her skinny nephew, but her imposing manner was a head higher. These are extraordinary times. You're extremely daring. You live in a high-rise apartment and aren't afraid of the building collapsing. But your uncle and I are old. We're scared witless. We're counting on you to go back and look after us. Luo Nan gaped, but he discovered that he didn't have the strength to argue. He really didn't have the strength. He had been working nonstop for 40 hours, and he hadn't closed his eyes once during this time. He faced the burning wraith, the burner, the ability users, and the secrets of the external neuron and gear. Countless information poured in and burst forth, and there was also the intense washing of emotions due to his mother and coward. He had practically overdrafted all of his energy. At this moment, he felt as if he had just returned home after a long and arduous march. Then, in the face of his aunt, who had always treated him as her own daughter, in the face of a rare family member who could completely relax, why should he argue and torment himself? In a moment of stupefaction, Luo Shuqing had already forcefully pulled Luo Nan's shoulder to face the door. Everyone, time is precious. Let's go. The familiar, unyielding, and affectionate action made the corner of Luo Nan's mouth twitch. He wanted to reveal a smile and announce his failure in front of his aunt. This was his usual routine, and it was what made his aunt most proud of him. Love, go, small, say, net chu, but halfway through. He couldn't go any further. Because at this moment, the fatigue, hardship, pressure, and most importantly, the uncontrollable complex emotions that had accumulated over the past 2 days all rushed to his head, roaring as he searched for an opportunity to vent them. It seemed that any slight tug on the facial nerves would cause the fragile dam to collapse, and everything would flow out. There was an instant when Luo Nan even wanted to drag his aunt back to school. He wanted to point out gear and the tree hole for her to see. He wanted to ask her if she felt the same way he did. However, when he thought about how his aunt knew almost nothing about his mother, this impulse disappeared. Some things were destined to be shouldered by oneself. No one would be able to fully accept and understand your feelings. The fact that he was able to tell Xie Junping so much today was already a sign of him losing control of his emotions. It would be difficult for him to do so again. 100 thoughts crossed Luo Nan's mind. In the end, Luo Nan just slightly raised his head to avoid letting his aunt see the sorry appearance of him losing control of his facial expression. But how to resolve this extremely unnatural movement was beyond his ability. Just as he was feeling awkward, his wristband vibrated. Luo Nan turned around in practically an instant, his back facing his aunt. He took a deep breath before connecting to his wristband. A half-familiar yet half-familiar voice immediately transmitted over. "Hey handsome, wanna meet?" "What's up?" Luo Nan already saw that it was Zhang Yingying's number. He didn't have the strength to tangle with this overly lively woman with words, but the hoarseness of his voice shocked him the instant he opened his mouth. Afraid that his aunt would hear something strange, Luo Nan walked a few steps into the house. Zhang Yingying was quite sharp. She could hear that Luo Nan's state was a bit off. She asked curiously, "Are you sleeping? Where are you?" Luo Nan adjusted his voice and did his best to use short and clear words. "At home." "Okay. I think so too. But your heart is quite big. You haven't received a notice of the entrance exam all day. You don't even know to call and ask?" How could Luo Nan say that he had completely forgotten about this matter? "I give it to you. Where did the initiative of the job seeker this morning go?" "I still remember even now. Teacher, I want to be a staff member." The young girl pinched her throat, fabricating words that Luo Nan had never said before. Luo Nan actually laughed. Far too many things had happened today. From Luo Nan's perspective, each matter was heavier than the last. His thoughts had already been forced into a very narrow region. Zhang Yingying's jesting brought it up made his mind much clearer. The professional ability, user society. Okay, the Explorers Society was a platform that he had to fight for no matter what. Right now, he didn't have the extra strength to go and think about things that had already happened. He didn't have any hope of becoming emotional and fretful. He asked, "It's starting?"
Aha.
Hurry back right now. Your main examiner is about to arrive at the large living area outside of Acumen College, the Limestone Water Village pub. I'll explain the specifics to you when you arrive. I feel that your chance has come. Limestone Water Village pub. Could this call have come 20 minutes earlier? Luo Nan was speechless for a time, but he didn't say much. After all, this phone call gave him an excellent reason. He hung up and his mood more or less calmed down. He turned around and wanted to speak to his aunt. But he never expected to meet Mrs. Luo Shuqing's curious gaze. "You're going out?"
Yes.
"A date?"
No.
Luo Nan immediately shrunk back. "Then what is it?" Luo Shuqing didn't let him off. It's a gathering." "A gathering? Limestone Water Village pub? I remember that it's near your school. Why don't you just go there?" "Didn't I forget?" Luo Nan was struggling to deal with this when he suddenly remembered something. It seemed that Shuelei's girlfriend had mentioned this afternoon. He operated his wristband on the spot, and sure enough, he received an invitation from the Acumen Mutual Assistance Association in his mailbox. Coincidentally, the Acumen Mutual Assistance Association's gathering location was also the Limestone Water Village pub. Of course, the meeting time had already passed, but it didn't affect him taking the blame. Luo Nan showed the email to his aunt. "This is the school's Mutual Assistance Association activity. It's a very formal cold dinner party." "Mutual Assistance Association. Why are you interested in it?" Luo Shuqing understood her child's temperament the best. With his introverted and autistic personality, how could he be interested in this kind of social gathering? Luo Nan took out a ready-made reason. The school societies are very exclusive. It would be very troublesome without a senior to lead the way. I still haven't joined a society yet. I'm afraid of getting my points deducted, so... You didn't pass the Mystic Arts Research Society test.
Yeah.
Did you take the initiative to go to the Mutual Assistance Association? No, they came to find me. Luo Shuqing finally believed him when she saw her nephew's introverted and immature expression. She shook her head. Acumen College is getting worse with each batch. If you knew this earlier, why did you set your mind on getting in? Luo Nan was silent. Luo Shuqing still wanted to say more, but she suddenly saw Luo Nan's thin figure standing in the room. Behind him was the familiar apartment furnishings. She was in a trance, as if she had gone back in time 20 years ago. He was also a young man, and he was smiling at her. Her heart ached slightly. When she looked again, that high-spirited smile had already been replaced by her nephew's stiff and dull face. Silence and oppression accumulated in the doorway. Luo Nan thought that his reason had failed, but his face went slightly cold. It was his aunt's palm. She lightly patted him. "Then go tidy up a bit. The handsome boy of the Luo family can't be looked down upon." Chapter 60. Genius, 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Shoa, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Luo Nan raised his head in astonishment and met his aunt's eyes. This strong woman, who was a department head in a multinational company, was frowning. "Don't tell me you want to wear your school uniform to the gathering?" No, I'm going to wash my face." How could Luo Nan not know that he had passed the test? He ran into the house in a hurry. During this time, he took the time to glance at the study. The large black leather box on the desk was very eye-catching, but there were no signs of it being moved, which made him heave a sigh of relief. Luo Nan quickly changed into casual clothes and came out. Luo Shuqing was actually a little dissatisfied with his appearance. He was clearly going to attend a gathering, but he still brought an old-fashioned notebook, as if he was going to take notes of a meeting. What was going on? In the end, she didn't point it out. She just said, "Let's go." Then she left first. Clearly, she was going to send Luo Nan to the gathering location. Luo Nan was already used to his aunt's forceful style. He was a well-behaved and obedient child. The 20-minute drive to the gathering place was destined to be full of struggles. Luo Nan's lackluster high school life had lasted less than a month. He had practically been asked about everything. The emphasis was placed on his relationships with his classmates. This caused Luo Nan, whose domain was practically blank, to be in quite a sorry state. They made it to the Limestone Water Village pub with great difficulty. Luo Shuqing was like the most dutiful of chauffeurs. She directly drove the flying car to the lobby and indicated that Luo Nan could get off. At the same time, her sharp eyes swept the lobby of the hotel. Luo Nan knew what his aunt was thinking, but he didn't have a single method to deal with it. He could only pray a few times in his heart, open the door, get off the car, and enter the lobby. Perhaps his luck had taken a turn for the better, but Luo Nan really did discover the sign-in area of the interactive meeting in a corner of the hall according to the hint of the invitation email. Even though there was no one on duty there, the electronic sign-in screen was still there. Luo Nan was able to find his name without a hitch. When he finished signing, his aunt's call came. "Don't stay out too late. Call me when the party is over." Luo Nan let out a sigh of relief when Luo Shuqing's flying car drove away outside the hotel. He glanced at the number of people who had signed in. There were actually more than 1,000 people. In Acumen College, due to the existence of the upper limit of society members, no society would have this kind of scale. Only an inter-society sorority could pull out such a grand display. Since there were so many people, one more or one less wouldn't make a difference. He didn't have to run over halfway and attract unwanted attention. However, Zhang Yingying was really unreliable. From the tone of the phone, it sounded like she had been waiting in the hotel for a long time. But where was she now? Luo Nan was about to contact her again, but before he could even dial out the number, he heard laughter coming from behind him. "Nanster, I thought you weren't coming." As he spoke, the sturdy Xue Lei strode over. Beside him was his girlfriend, Chen Xiaolin. Both of them were tall and had long legs. In just a few steps, they had already reached the front. Luo Nan hastily ended the call. He felt awkward and baffled. Weren't these two people too well informed? He had only signed his name. If it was only Xue Lei, it would be easy to handle. But facing Chen Xiaolin, Luo Nan still needed to be courteous. "Apologies, Senior Sister Chen. I was busy, so I came late." Chen Xiaolin pursed her lips into a smile. "Leister, and I didn't think you would come. I was shocked to see the message on the sign-in screen." Luo Nan didn't know how to respond for a time. Chen Xiaolin seemed to have drunk a bit of alcohol. Her cheeks were slightly red and she spoke quite straightforwardly. "But it's good that Junior could come. You're giving me face. After all, your sign-in counts as my performance." Having spoken to this point, Luo Nan naturally couldn't say that he didn't want to come. He actually wanted to leave. He could only follow the two of them to the banquet hall. It was just as Chen Xiaolin said. The cold dinner this time was very formal. There was a big shot from the student council, who pulled in sponsors. They reserved the number 1 banquet hall of the hotel. The scene was extremely grand. Number 1 banquet hall was on the 27th floor. There were no unused elevators in the hall, so the three of them chatted as they waited. Chen Xiaolin talked about the matter of the society in a few words. This was also the reason why she invited Luo Nan to participate in the banquet. "I've already found people related to the matter of the society. I'll bring you and Leister to meet them later. Do your best to pick one that is more to your liking. Leister, don't say that the society is boring. There are no credits." Luo Nan had no choice but to open his mouth. "Senior Sister, the matter regarding the society." Actually, Chen Xiaolin frowned. "You did it ahead of time?" Luo Nan nodded in agreement. "Li Mingda did it?" Chen Xiaolin's face flushed red again. This time it wasn't just because she was drunk, but because she was angry. "Junior, I've already mentioned it to you. The matter of the society is too complicated. It's not what you think it is. Do you know where Li Mingda is right now? He's in this hotel. He's being entertained in a private room. Even if you have to go through him, do you think it's more effective in his office or here?" "She's drunk." Shuele first reminded Luo Nand in a low voice. Then he turned to face Chen Xiaolin and guaranteed, Nanster definitely didn't go through the procedures with Elder Illustrious Virtue. I can testify to this. Elder Illustrious Virtue was quite angry at the time. Luo Nan could see Chen Xiaolin's state. He wasn't angry, but he found it strange that Shuele didn't explain the matter clearly to Chen Xiaolin. I asked Shuele in a whisper, and he shrugged. Isn't there that senior Xia? He has a lot of connections there, and I'm not good with words. Luo Nan immediately understood that this sturdy young man of the same age, with rough lines, actually had quite a plan in mind. He was absolutely not a boorish fellow who couldn't even keep his mouth shut. What are you guys talking about? Chen Xiaolin frowned and stared at them. At this time, she was tipsy and looked charmingly naive. Luo Nan and Shuele raised their heads together. They were just about to explain when the elevator door opened and a dozen or so people walked out. It looked like the atmosphere was pretty good. Their laughter was loud and clear. Shuele wasn't interested in these things. He blocked the elevator door and let Chen Xiaolin and Luo Nan get in. Unexpectedly, Chen Xiaolin pulled him back.
Wait.
Huh, you see that person? He just came out of the elevator. The youngest one.
I just told you about him.
He's the vice president of the student council, Chen Weiqian. He's the president of the Mutual Assistance Society. He's my immediate superior. Luo Nan and Shuele both looked over. The group of people had already walked out of the hall and were chatting outside. They couldn't see too clearly due to the contrast in the lighting. But from what they remembered, there weren't many young people inside. Chen Xiaolin took a few deep breaths in an attempt to lower her tipsy state a bit. Then she reminded them, Senior Chen is an authoritative figure in the student council. His family seems to have military connections. He's quite a nice person normally, because we're from the same family. Our relationship is quite good. I didn't ask him for help with this matter, but he mentioned it. It will certainly be a lot easier to handle. She was going to strike up a conversation. Shuele and Luo Nan's gazes locked. They could both see the lack of interest in each other. However, Shuele soon grinned and was secretly kicked by Chen Xiaolin's pointed high heel. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.